Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Kakashi gives Naruto dog summon contract. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Jedi Honor-Bound Ninja and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1, Fate in the Rain. Chapter Summary. Hatake Kakashi is a dedicated and loyal ANBU soldier. He is the most skilled and elite ninja of Konoha since the death of the Yondaime Hokage and takes to this responsibility, as he has all others. There are times, however, when fate does not like the cards dealt and decides to try and change what it has wrought. Little does Kakashi know just how his life is about to change. Hatake Kakashi sometimes hated his role as ANBU Black Ops. The hours were ridiculous. The missions were near suicidal if there were missions at all, and he was just bored with it all. He was either a silent sentry or a silent killing machine, and the village could not make up its mind which it wanted him to be. Needless to say, it left him feeling stressed, worn, and ragged along the edges. He was only thankful for the masks they were required to wear, which probably hid most of those feelings away from the world. A dog mask covered his face even now, a last joke played by the late Yondaime Hokage. The man had merely called it irony when he presented the mask to one of the youngest maid jounin in the village. Kakashi had called him a bastard, not amused by the prank his former sensei had just gotten away with. Just because he could summon Nin dogs did not mean he had to be the Inu mask. Yondaime had merely laughed and clapped him on the shoulder proudly. Now years later, the mask represented that one slim thread he still had to his previous life. That small thread of sanity he still had. He had to make the Yondaime proud of him to be worthy of that mask, and going and getting himself killed would not cut it. As he walked through the throngs of people in the later evening streets, his favorite companion trotted alongside him. A little pug with a blue coat and a leaf headband kept up despite his shorter legs and stouter body type. Every so often the pug would grunt or growl at something, but it went unnoticed. There was not much to see tonight, and Kakashi could feel the heavy weight in the air of the impending storm. This was ritual to them both. Kakashi would summon Pakken when he was certain of a few days off, and the pug would keep watch while he slumbered. Paranoia maybe, but the life of the ANBU was not an easy one. Pakken seemed to enjoy the time down as it was. Normally Kakashi only summoned his dogs for messaging and battles. A loud rumble of thunder made most of the people in the streets scatter. Kakashi merely cursed and hunched his shoulders a bit more. He had hoped to beat the storm home. Nature had other plans, it seemed. This day was turning into a fantastically bad one. Pakken seemed to huddle closer to his legs. That was until something caught the pug's ears as they neared the neighborhood Kakashi's apartment complex was in. Pakken stopped mid-step and looked around, ear alert and at attention. He started to sniff the air and then shot off without as much as a word to Kakashi. The dog-masked 18-year-old watched as his pet rushed off. Damn it, Pakken, he cursed as he began to follow the trail his dog had taken off on. The little pug rushed down a long alleyway until he stopped atop a pile of boxes. He sniffed around them a bit before just sitting there and looking down behind them. He whimpered and sniffed a little closer to whatever it was he thought he had found. Pakken, it's raining. I'm not in the mood. Kakashi was about to grab the scruff of the dog when little hands reached out and hugged the pug around his neck. There behind the boxes was a little boy getting drenched by the sudden rainfall. Pakken. A little voice cried out, and Pakken licked him gently. The boy had said the dog's name with a certain inflection Kakashi had not heard before, either because the child was cold and shivering or because he did not know how to say it correctly. Runt, what are you doing out in this weather? Pakken began to admonish the child as he continued to lick at the boy's arms, which Kakashi noticed were scratched up and bruised. Shouldn't you go home? The suggestion seemed to deter the little blonde-haired boy, because he withdrew his hold on the pug and rocked back a bit on his heels. He fingered his torn shirt a bit and avoided making eye contact with the pug. Finally, after much internal debate, the boy answered, I don't have a home. Kakashi froze after hearing the softly muttered words. It was unreal. The kid was only around 4 or 5 years old. There was no way that he did not have somewhere to. Then the light bulb clicked on in Kakashi's head. A mob of spiky blonde hair, glassy blue eyes, and an orphan that looked no older than 4 years of age. Please no. Kakashi whispered as his feet moved against him, moving him closer to the scene ahead of him. Pakken nuzzled the boy, which rewarded the pug with arms wrapping back around his neck. You don't have anywhere to go, Runt? Pakken questioned as the boy curled up to the dog that was just slightly smaller in size than him, looking for the slightest bit of warmth he could find in the cold rain. Pakken, Kakashi admonished lightly, and at last the boy realized his presence in the ally. The boy froze almost immediately, and his grip on Pakken lessened again. I'm sorry, mister. I didn't know he was yours. He started to babble as he backed away from Kakashi, nearly stumbling over his bare feet. This is Kakashi. Pakken murmured to the boy in an attempt to reassure him. He is my master. He won't hurt you, Naruto. Kakashi reached up to remove the dog mask he had forgotten to take off earlier. Inwardly, Pakken's name for the boy sealed his suspicions in stone. He knelt down to the little boy's level and tried his best not to be too intimidating. It was hard to do when most of the time his life depended on him being able to intimidate and overpower others. Pakken, what did you find back here? He smiled softly, letting his eye close and crinkle a bit to show he was actually smiling behind his other mask. A new friend? I found him a few days ago, Pakin reported. I thought he was one of the neighborhood kids. He looked lonely, so I started playing with him. I didn't realize he was an orphan. Kakashi could piece together what Pakin had left out. During the days he slept on end, the only times he summoned Pakin here in this area were his days off. The little runt of a dog was going out on excursions while he slept, and he had come upon the little boy and probably liked the attention said boy gave him. Kakashi took in the kid's appearance now that he was closer to them both. His cloths were torn, the kid was scrawny, and he had bruises and scratches all over him, not just his arms. Naruto, was it? The boy nodded slowly, looking around the alleyway as if he were expecting something to jump out at him. Blue eyes would rest on Kakashi only briefly before flitting away again, nervously scanning his surroundings. Where are your caregivers, Naruto? I don't have any, was his instant reply, and Kakashi had to bite down the rising rush of anger at the admittance. They left a long time ago and said not to come back, or they'd, and the little voice trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished. They'd what? Kakashi prompted him lightly. The blue eyes focused on him like a hawk trying to gauge what it was Kakashi wanted from him. The boy did not answer the question. Instead he went about fingering one of the bruises on his right arm. Kakashi assumed he would have gotten beaten if he had returned wherever he was supposed to be staying, and the boy found it safer to do as he was told. He reached out to touch the boy but was too slow as the boy darted from him and pressed himself up against the wall of the alley. Kakashi let his hand rest back on his knees. Silently Pakin went forward, snagged the child's shirt in his mouth and began pulling the boy back towards Kakashi. Kakashi would have to ask the pug later, but he was sure Pakin had realized something was wrong with the kid from the get-go, and had started playing with the child to gain his trust. What 4-year-old could resist a talking dog? Once Pakin had the child within reach, Kakashi reached out again and let his hand rest on the boy's head. The boy flinched and kept his eyes tightly shut as Kakashi ruffled the blonde hair affectionately. I won't hurt you, Naruto. The words earned him a glance from underneath a squinted eyelid. Slowly both blue eyes came open and the boy watched Kakashi as Kakashi watched back. It was almost like the boy was trying to see right through him and determine if he actually meant the words or was just saying them to calm him. What do you say to getting out of this rain? Kakashi queried as he stood up slowly. He reached down and picked up the little blonde, noting he weighed nothing, and positioned him on one arm. The boy had gone rigid at the contact, but Kakashi continued to just hold the boy closely to stop the shivering that had started. Any friend of Pakin's is a friend of mine. Pakin began running ahead and Kakashi began to follow him. He was now back on track towards his apartment with one more guest in tow. He tried to keep the same passive, calm emotional state more for the sake of the boy than himself, but he found his mind would not be quiet enough for him to achieve that. All he could keep thinking over and over again was the promise of another Hokage and how untrue the promise had been. There was also the fact that they were getting drenched by the rainfall, and he was sure that getting wet was not the best thing for either of them, so slowly he began to up his pace. He took sidelong glances at the boy each time he sped up to assure himself he was not startling or spooking the kid. So far the boy merely widened his eyes and looked around him as they moved. When Kakashi finally made it home, he leapt up to his one window, the one he left unlocked for quick and easy entrance, and came indoors to the warm, dry apartment he called his own. He deposited the boy on the lone couch in his living room and went about looking for something the kid could wear instead of the drenched t-shirt and pants he had on. He also needed dry clothes. Are you a ninja? The boy had asked after Kakashi had found the only suitable thing he could and was taking the drenched, torn t-shirt off of the kid to replace it with an obviously too large shirt of his own. Kakashi caught sight of more bruising and inwardly he wanted to go out and start cracking skulls together. Instead he decided to focus in on the question. Yes, I am. Why do you ask? Well, Pakin talks. The boy shook his head after it popped through the head hole of the t-shirt, and looked at the pug that had joined him on the couch. Sometimes too much. Kakashi muttered, which earned him a little growl from Pakin. Naruto did not quite pick up on the playful bantering the two were having. Still he accepted the answer and leaned over on the pug. How does somebody get a talking dog? Kakashi had not expected this particular question, but he smiled as he kneeled down in front of the boy and bit into one of his fingers. He showed him the blood and went through the hand signs and summoned one of his other nin dogs, Hey. The little boy's eyes went wide and he hugged Pakin closer to him, but he was smiling in delight at the white and gray dog with bandages. I can summon nin dogs. Kakashi went to his kitchen to find a notepad he usually left there. Why he was never sure, but he knew it was there. He began scrawling on it, and then whistled to Hey, still sniffing inquisitively at the boy on his couch. Kakashi handed Hey the paper, which he took gingerly in his mouth, and then nodded as Kakashi whispered to him to take it to the Hokage. He returned to his living room to find the kid now lying on his couch. Pakin looked up at him, almost pleadingly, before sniffing at the child and curling up next to Naruto. Kakashi-san, he whimpered almost, laying his head on the child's chest. When did you really find him, Pakin? Realizing the boy had fallen asleep in the course of 5 minutes, he reached out and touched the boy and did not see the flinching reaction, so it stood to reason he was out cold. A few weeks ago. I saw his caretakers chasing him. Pakin replied. I couldn't get close to him till about a week ago. I just figured he hid in the alley till he thought it was safe to go home, Kakashi. I thought he was just a battered kid. I didn't realize they kicked him out for good. You still should have said something, Pakin. Kakashi scratched the pug's ears a bit and sat on the other side of the kid. The boy whimpered a bit himself and flinched away from the weight at his side. You mean to say you don't recognize him? Pakin sat up and regarded the little boy's face. No, should I? You're really going soft, Pakin. Kakashi laughed and pointed to a picture frame still above his headrest near his bed. It's Sensei's son. The pug turned his head to focus on the picture, then back to the little boy. A few times he went between the image and the child before snorting in frustration. I didn't realize, Kakashi, I'm sorry. Kakashi merely let his hands run through the boy's wet hair, trying unsuccessfully to get the excess water out. I didn't at first either. The Hokage told me he was being taken care of. The Sandaime might have believed that. Pakin sighed. He is very afraid to cause trouble to others. I think more than just his caretakers come after him. It looks that way. Kakashi sighed and removed his headband and his boots, leaving them by the couch instead of in his room. There was no guarantee when the Hokage could break away from the tower, and there was no guarantee it would be the Hokage. It could be someone else coming to see about the child he had written about in his note. You keep watch, Pakin. He reached under the child very carefully and lifted him up. He laid him under the covers of his bed and patted his head lightly before curling up next to the boy. He let his hand rest very carefully on the boy's back. In his mind it was to keep the kid warm. He had gotten wet in the rain and he did not want the boy to be sick. Pakin knew, however, it was a gesture to comfort the child and in some ways Kakashi himself. Pakin curled up at the end of the bed and watched the living Ariel while the two slept. The pug knew as soon as Kakashi brought up the fact of the child's parentage that his master was probably berating himself. The death of his sensei, his surrogate father, had hit hard and the pug was sure that the teenager behind him would return to his more rigorous training and missions. Sure enough he had, and that was why the pug was glad for the off time they did get, and that Kakashi still called on him when he needed him. Still, as he looked back over the two, this was going to be a harder pill to swallow. Though Kakashi had been assured of his safety, it seemed the Hokage had been hasty in saying that the child was safe. It was hours later when Pakin heard the door opening slowly. An elderly man walked through, and though he did not wear the usual robes that the pug attributed to the older Hokage, he recognized the man's face and his scent. Sandaime Hokage turned and focused on Pakin, then on Kakashi and Naruto. He walked quietly back to the room and he stood looking down at the pair for a long time, looking rather old and sad. Finally he broke the silence and reached out to pat the dog. Hello, Pakin, Hokage-sama. The pug replied and looked back as well. By now Naruto had realized there was a warm body next to his own, one that did not reach out and strike him. Naturally he had clung to Kakashi's shirt and his head rested in the crook of Kakashi's neck. In turn the Jounin had allowed his arm to curl around the little boy and his chin rested in now dry blonde hair. The Hokage sighed heavily and sat on the edge with Pakin. His hand began petting the pug gently and Pakin allowed it, seeing the distress in the older man's eyes. I wish I could find him a home. The Hokage muttered. This makes twice the orphanage has done something like this. The orphanage workers did this? Kakashi's eye peered at the old man sitting on his bed. As Pakin guessed, Kakashi was already aware of the Hokage but opted to stay very still so not to disturb his guest. You assured me he was being taken care of, Hokage-sama. I'm afraid so, yes. Sarutobi rubbed at the temples of his head, ignoring the last accusation. The last time they tried poisoning him. The admission made Pakin snarl involuntarily and Kakashi's eye flashed with anger. Sarutobi sighed more and hung his head. No one will adopt him. No one even wants to keep an eye out for him. They all see a demon fox, not a little boy. People chase him and yell at him. Pakin added. I know. Sarutobi nodded. And it is hard to keep track of him when something like this happens. He just hides away from everyone including me. Nothing I've tried has convinced them that he's nothing but a child. Kakashi unconsciously tightened his grip on the 4-year-old, and in response the child's grip on him tightened in kind. If it were not for the fox's attack on Konoha, his sensei would still be alive, and this poor kid would not be hiding in alleys behind boxes. Sarutobi stood and straightened. I'll try to think of something else. Thank you for finding him, Kakashi. The older man made a move to take the boy but Kakashi shook his head at him rather forcibly. The boy whimpered and clung more desperately to the warmth he had found. He's fine here, Hokage-sama. Kakashi paused and rubbed slightly at the boy's back. Until you figure something out, that is. The Hokage watched for a moment then nodded. Very well then, I'll leave him with you. Kakashi watched as the Hokage left the way he came, absently cursing himself in his head. It was too late now. He glanced at Pakin, who merely readjusted himself in the blankets to be closer to the two and sighed. Kakashi readjusted his hold on Naruto and closed his eye once more. I'll keep an eye on him, sensei, I promise. Kakashi watched, almost in awe, as the silent little boy climbed his countertops. He had already found a bowl, a spoon, and was now in the process of trying to reach the cereal he had found on the topmost shelves of the cabinets in his kitchen. Pakin had bitten his foot to wake Kakashi, as apparently the boy had watched for a good while before deciding it was safe enough to slip away and explore the apartment. Naruto was about to fall backwards and Kakashi instinctively reached out and stopped him. The blue eyes looked back and up to him, almost fearfully. Kakashi reached up to the higher shelves where the cereal box was precariously dangling from. I take it you're hungry then? I'm sorry, mister, really I am. The boy began apologizing profusely as Kakashi held him in the air. You don't have to be sorry, Naruto-kun. Kakashi sat him at the small table and returned to his kitchen. And you can call me Kakashi instead of Mr. You know. Sorry, Kakashi-sama. Kakashi returned with breakfast for both of them. The voice was uncertain and formal, but the cautious blue eyes looked up at him hopefully as he sat a bowl of cereal in front of him. Kakashi sat across from him and slid down the one mask to eat as well. Maybe it would put the kid at ease if he paid him no mind. You really don't mind, Kakashi-sama? Kakashi waved his hand at him to go ahead, and the kid tore into it as if he had not eaten in days. Cautiously Kakashi stood and returned with the cereal box and sat it in front of the boy who watched him as he did. When the bowl was empty, the child carefully filled it again and smiled at it for a second before continuing to stuff himself. Naruto-kun, Kakashi probed gently after it seemed he was slowing. When's the last time you ate? I dunno. Couple days ago, when the nice man at the ramen place let me have some. Naruto got a really happy look on his face as he spoke about it. Kakashi merely nodded and glanced over at Pakken, sitting nearby and keeping watch still. Do you have any belongings that your caretakers still have? Nope. Kami, he was awfully chipper for having been abandoned on the streets. Kakashi could only stare at him, and wonder why it had taken him this long to check up on the kid. Save for the assurances the Hokage had always given him, he had never once thought about what had become of the boy. And that shamed him greatly. Do you think you could stay here with Pakken, Naruto? Naruto glanced at the dog, then back up to Kakashi. You sure it's okay to? Yes, Kakashi smiled a bit. I just have to run a few errands. Okay. Kakashi stood and went to grab his things. Pakken followed him and waited for his instructions. I will be back, Pakken. Just make sure he doesn't destroy anything or hurts himself. I need to find something other than what he came in with, to where he trailed off looking at the tattered clothing. All right then, Pakken nodded and returned to the kitchen and the boy. Kakashi leapt out a window in his bedroom and off towards the stores. He was completely confused about what he was about to do. What did one buy for a 4-year-old child? Why did it feel like it was his responsibility to? Still, he found himself meandering the streets of Konoha looking for clothing that obviously would not fit him. He was going to pay when the rumor mills got a hold on this information. He returned hours later with a couple of bags in tow. He found Pakken lying with the boy on his bed again. Naruto was curled up tightly next to Pakken. Pakken's head rested atop the boy's legs. It was a rather touching little scene as the pug looked rather content and asleep, and Naruto had a smile plastered across his face even as he slept. It occurred to Kakashi that this might be the only time the little boy had a safe place to sleep. He sat down the bags, took the ramen he had procured to the kitchen, and then sat watching the two for another hour before Pakken finally stirred awake. Oh, you're back. The pug grunted and sat up. You two look so peaceful. Kakashi laughed, and was rewarded with a sharp bite to his ankle. Cut it out, Pakken. Pakken puffed away, finally able to leave now that Kakashi had returned. The summoned dog probably was exhausted by this point, but Kakashi had not thought to explain to Naruto that the dog might disappear. Pakken had kept himself here much longer than he was used to. The blonde's blue eyes jerked open at the sound of the dog's leaving, and he sat up looking frantic for a second. His eyes rested on Kakashi for a split second before he took off to hide. Kakashi sighed and allowed the boy to hide himself before calling out to him. Naruto. It's okay. A blonde head peered out from behind his closet doors. Damn, the kid was fast. Oh, sorry, Kakashi-sama. You scared me. Kakashi smirked to himself, and opened the door all the way to peer down at him. Why did I scare you? I kinda forgot someone else lived here. Naruto frowned a bit, and scanned his surroundings. Where did Pakken go? He had to return home for a bit. Doesn't he live here? Naruto was confused, and Kakashi knelt down to be more at his level. He's a nin dog. He's summoned with my chakra. When he runs out of chakra he goes home. Oh. Naruto fidgeted and looked at Kakashi's hands, remembering how he summoned the other dog just yesterday. Will he come back? If I need him to. Oh, anyway, I think I have something better than Pakken. Earlier that day Kakashi had watched the boy's face light up when he had spoken about the nice man at the ramen place knowing the boy's father's taste for the same food and how he had put a particular ramen place on the map in Konoha. Kakashi had gone to Ichiraku's and asked Tuchi about the boy. Sure enough, Tuchi had tried to keep an eye out for the boy, and whenever he thought the kid looked too thin or hungry he had lured the boy forward with the free food. It was the least he could do, the owner explained, seeing as Kakashi's sensei had been a favorite of theirs. He was thankful also that someone seemed to have finally picked up on the boy and had taken him in. Kakashi led the boy out to the table again where he had originally left the food. He knew he did not have much in the apartment save for some things here and there, and had brought some home with him. He waited patiently, and soon enough the kid came out to watch him. He motioned to the box and the boy's face did light up and he rushed forward. Thanks, Kakashi-sama. You're like the nicest adult ever. Technically speaking, Kakashi was still a teenager himself. He was only 18, but to Naruto Kakashi seemed much older. Kakashi felt much older too. He had been a full-fledged ninja of the village technically since he was 5. Most jounin felt much older than their age, even more so to someone who had been inducted so long ago. To Kakashi he stopped being a kid that mission into rock to destroy that bridge, so he did not discourage the boy by saying his age. Like a ravenous animal the boy ate, and Kakashi sighed as he watched on. Sandaime had yet to get back to him, and Kakashi figured that really there was not much the Hokage was able to do. He could send Naruto back to the orphanage and try to keep a closer watch on their actions, or he could force some family to take the boy where his treatment would probably be the same, if not worse, than at the orphanage. Involuntarily he looked to the other room in the apartment. It was somewhat small and he used it to throw things like extra weapons and gear into. It really was not a room as it was a storage bin. He wondered idly about where he could stick those items if he emptied out the room, then berated himself on how insane he was. He was ANBU. Still, finished? He asked as the boy seemed to slide down the chair and gave off a contented sigh as he went. The child nodded his head and patted his stomach. Come on, let's get you dressed then. Oh. Are my clothes dry? The boy asked as he jumped off the chair. They were too torn. I found you something else though. Kakashi explained as sat out the black pants and cream-colored t-shirt he had finally found that afternoon. Naruto merely blinked at them for a moment before reaching out to touch them and let his fingers caress the fabric. The kid quickly changed, carefully placing Kakashi's oversized t-shirt back on his bed and went about smoothing out the wrinkles as best he could from it. Kakashi was confused by the action but wanted to guess that it was an attempt to please the teenager. Naruto was doing everything he could think of to keep Kakashi in a good mood. As with the impromptu breakfast, Kakashi decided that perhaps ignoring him would better put the child at ease. He kept alert to Naruto's movements, but he merely returned to his living room, found a book and perched himself in a windowsill to read. For his credit, the boy merely peered out at him, watched for a couple of minutes and then went about exploring his surroundings some more. Naruto found the discarded paper he kept in his kitchen and the pencil there, and then proceeded to perch himself a few feet away near another window. He would talk quietly to himself as he drew and for the most part became nearly non-existent in the apartment. Kakashi smirked a little and decided to actually read what he had picked up and enjoyed the comforting quiet. Sure, he could tell the kid was there. He had been a ninja too long and Naruto was nearly a beacon of chakra to him, but the quiet and the calm seemed to exude from the boy and it was relaxing. When the knock came at his door it somewhat startled him, and he noted the hour. Kakashi slipped off his perch, quietly walking around the blonde who did not seem in the least bit fazed by the sudden nose and kept to his activity whatever it was. Kakashi opened the door and let in the Hokage standing there with his hands clasped behind his back. Hokage-sama. Kakashi bowed his head a little and allowed the older man to enter. Sandaime stepped in and smiled a bit at the sight of the little boy on the living room floor, then back to Kakashi. Has he been bothering you? Not really. Kakashi scratched his head. He kind of keeps to himself. Ah, so he does. Sandaime nodded and stepped further into the room to eye the blonde. The older man could clearly see he had different clothes. He looked rather content and for once in the Hokage's knowledge the boy was smiling. Not that fake grin he always flashed, a real honest smile. So I assume you realize I haven't found him anywhere to go. I would have figured as much. Kakashi sighed and rubbed at his neck anxiously. Sandaime chuckled a bit when Naruto sat up and eyed him and Kakashi talking. Usually the kid would shrink at the sight of him, but the blue orb settled on Kakashi, and then turned back to his drawing. Every so often the blue eyes would dart over to them, and then away before he thought either man had noticed him. Maybe I could keep an eye on him. Kakashi whispered and shocked the Hokage's gaze back onto the barely 18-year-old. Before the Hokage could find the right words the ANBU captain continued on with his thought. I have a small room that would suit him for now, and though I am ANBU, Pakin could stay with him when I'm away. Pakin would agree to such a thing? Sandaime snorted, thinking of the dour little pug and his usual gruffness. Pakin's the one that found him. Kakashi merely shrugged in response, taking another glance toward the boy who quickly ducked his head again. Sandaime could not help but give a small laugh at the sight before him. Here was one of their most feared and talented ANBU captains, barely an adult himself, trying to logically explain why it would be better just to leave the boy at his apartment. His line of thinking was logical, as was anything Kakashi ever came up with, but his reasoning had to be purely instinctual. My only other option, he began slowly eyeing Kakashi to gauge how much of his logic was based on guilt, or if it was based on something else, was to find him an apartment, and have someone check on him every so often. I did not want to go that route because he's much too young for that. But then again, we've had children not much older than him graduate from the academy. Why hasn't he started there anyways? Most start around 4 or 5, depending on their birth dates. Kakashi snorted and glared back at the Hokage. I believe the orphanage put it as they did not want him learning any tricks to use against them. That is if I remember it correctly. Hokage took a puff on his pipe. They thought he'd be too dangerous and told him he could not go. He never asked after that. And you didn't do anything? Kakashi prodded a bit was ignored by the older man. Naruto, come here, would you? The Hokage called out, and the boy sat up uncertainly and came towards them, head down. He had not been awake when the Hokage came previously. He must have thought that the Hokage finally found where he was hiding. Naruto stood still, head bowed in front of them for a few seconds while his fingers played with the hem of his new shirt. Yes, Aji-san? Aji-san. Kakashi could not help but snort a bit in laughter at the other man's nickname. It earned him a hard glare from the Hokage before the man knelt down in front of Naruto. Have you been chased out again, Naruto-kun? He asked quietly, and Naruto nodded his head. And how did they do it this time? Told me if I came back they'd break my legs, so I couldn't. Naruto admitted sheepishly and looked predictably towards his legs. Kakashi tried hard to quell the instant rage, but what he really wanted to do was fly out the window and find whoever they was. To threaten a child with such a thing? What kind of people were there working at the orphanage? They said just to stay in the ally or go back to where I came from. Before the Sandaime or Kakashi could say anything more, the boy rushed in again with a comment. But I don't know where I came from, Aji-san, so I couldn't go there. Sandaime gently patted the boy on the head. You came from right here in the Leaf Village, Naruto-kun. I hear you found a new friend though. He quickly changed the subject to help alleviate any anxiety the boy suddenly acquired. A little pug? Oh yeah. Naruto nodded enthusiastically. He's Kakashi-sama's Nindog Pakin. He wanted to play with me and he brought Kakashi-sama with him. Blue Eyes smiled up at Kakashi briefly, then turned back onto the Sandaime, who was now smiling widely around his pipe, amused by the sudden change in behavior. He's a ninja too. He's one of the first ones to be nice to me. Do you like Kakashi, Naruto-kun? Well sure, the little boy became quiet again. He bought me new clothes and brought home ramen and let me sleep in his bed, and, so would you be willing to listen to Kakashi if he told you to do something? Sandaime asked and cut off the boy's long list of good Kakashi had done for him so far. Sure. The boy nodded happily and flashed an even bigger grin. You can go back to playing, Naruto. Sandaime chuckled and waved the boy off, but the boy stood glued to the ground in front of them. You mean I don't have to go back? Not this time, Naruto-kun. Sandaime reassured him. Go back to what you were doing. They both could tell that Naruto was reluctant to do so, unsure by the change in routine. He eventually did what he was told, and returned to glancing back at them both as they turned from him facing now the kitchen. Kakashi, Sandaime started to say, but the ANBU cut him off. Hokage-sama, all due respect, but I think it would be better than just throwing him out on his own. To just return him where people only hurt him seems cruel. To just throw him out on his own seems even crueler. This does seem a better agreement. The Sandaime relented and patted Kakashi on the shoulder. Even with you taking missions and doing as you are now, you will be here a great deal of the time. Maybe I can get him started in the academy without anyone telling him no, and he won't even be here that much. But I could make sure he's actually getting fed, has somewhere safe to sleep. Sandaime frowned over at the boy. He is a bit thin, isn't he? You should watch him eat. Eats more than I do. Well, that just might be genetics. The Sandaime snorted. Well, maybe there's more genetics in him than he's just afraid to trust it. Kakashi muttered and looked over his shoulder in time to see the kid jerk his head away from them. There was a long draw of silence as the Hokage took several drags from his pipe, allowing the smoke to filter out slowly. He was mulling the idea over, Kakashi could tell, and was unsure if he agreed or disagreed with his own reasoning. Very well then, Kakashi-san. I will leave him in your care. I will have a monthly stipend drew up for his care and send it to you along with your pay for your missions. I'll give you a few more days off to get things settled and arranged. The old man's eyes closed as he genuinely smiled. And so I can get him into a class at the academy. Of course, Hokage-sama. Kakashi nodded in response, and the old man left soundlessly out the door. It had not gone unnoticed by Naruto, and he frowned as he watched after the retreating Hokage. Kakashi smirked a bit, and walked over to where the boy sat on his floor. What's wrong, Naruto-kun? Well, Aji-san left. He did. He's not going to take me back to the orphanage or the tower? Naruto's frown deepened. No, not this time. Kakashi reached down to ruffle the blonde hair and smiled more as the boy stubbornly tried to reposition the spikes once he removed his hand. We both thought you would like to stay here. Naruto's eyes went wide and his gaze was riveted on the older man. You mean it? Really? Yes, really. The blonde latched himself around Kakashi's legs and the jounin involuntarily froze at the sudden rush of it. He could hear the continual stream of thank you over and over again, muffled by how the boy's head was buried as he hugged the older teenager. Finally Kakashi recovered enough to reach down, and just let his hand rest in the blonde spikes as the boy continued to thank him. Mom said not to play with him. Why doesn't anyone come to get him? Bet no one wants him. Dad said he was trouble. Naruto hunched his shoulders and tried desperately to keep his eyes glued to the dirt road in front of him as he left the academy. The whispers were always the same, it was just different people who pointed and talked when they thought he was not looking. To Naruto it was like just being back at the orphanage where the adults openly told children not to play with him or talk to him. The Hokage had tried to explain that it would be hard to make friends at first. He had started later than the others in his class, but not to worry. That was well over a few months ago, and Naruto still felt like shrinking into a corner and staying there permanently. The only one he felt comfortable around here was Iruka-sensei, and even he had been somewhat dismissive of Naruto at first. Everyone else tended to steer clear of him and shut up if he got near or asked them anything, so it was not hard to see why he always rushed back to the apartment he now lived in. He guessed he could call it his home now because he had yet to be kicked out yet. The other occupant of the apartment, Kakashi, usually came home a little after he did, and the older teen would either talk to him or silently read somewhere in the apartment, depending on his mood. Naruto was just happy there was someone who recognized he was there and was nice to him. This week, however, Kakashi was not there. He had explained to Naruto that he was going on a mission. He was going to be gone for a few days more than likely, and he would return after he was finished. Kakashi had pointed out all the obvious things and told him if he needed anything to go to the Hokage, or to his teachers. That had been a good week or so ago, and Naruto became even more depressed returning home. It had been concerning the first couple of nights to feel completely alone again. A part of him knew, however, that the man would return like promised. It just did not seem right that the silver-haired man would leave him. Naruto carefully opened the door and shut it behind him. He tossed aside his books and jacket, and moved to the kitchen and began looking for something to eat. One of the big pluses about staying in the apartment was there was always food, and Kakashi never discouraged him from taking anything. He still found time to harass the old man and the ramen stand and enjoyed the attention the girl working the counter gave him, but he went there less often as a beggar rather. Now he could pay for what he wanted. Naruto took his snack to his room, leaving the door slightly propped open but mostly shut, and sat in the center of his bed looking around. He was bored to death in the small apartment by himself, but Kakashi had not left Pakin behind and he was too scared to leave the apartment. He was left with very little to entertain himself, but the idea of going through the village alone was terrifying to him. Maybe the old ladies who had left him before would find him and be mad that he was out. Maybe the villagers would see him alone and think he was up to trouble. There were too many maybes and he did not want to risk it. So it was not so much of a surprise that he woke, sometime later that evening, to the sound of the door shutting. Naruto rubbed at his eyes and looked out the window to note it was late now. He still felt a little apprehensive about this new arrangement. So as he heard the door shut he merely crept up to his bedroom door to peek out instead of rushing out to greet the older occupant of the home. It was possible that someone found out Naruto was here, and it was not Kakashi coming home at all. In the dark light the boy caught the sluggish movement of whoever had entered as they shuffled down the hallway and past his room. The familiar gray outfit and the dog mask hung haphazardly over his shoulder. It put Naruto slightly at ease, yet he still held back from rushing forward. Something was different in the way his roommate walked. Naruto poked his head out further to keep Kakashi in his sights as he moved into his own room. Kakashi merely slumped into his bed with little more than a heavy thump that was different too. Kakashi always took off his headband and his boots. He always set those things to the right of his bed, the boots on the floor and the headband on a table. This time he did not do those things. After a few minutes Naruto began to inch towards the room. Kakashi remained motionless on his bed and Naruto felt a gnawing in his gut. What if this was not Kakashi? What if it was someone dressed like him? He bit down the anxious gnawing and got himself positioned at the side of Kakashi's bed, watching the older man breathe ragged breaths as he lay on his stomach. His arms were up around his head, covering his face a bit. Naruto could see the rips in the normally pristine gray outfit, and noted there were red discolorations around each one. Kakashi still seemed unaware of his presence, and normally Naruto could not sneak up on him, even when they were playing. So slowly he reached out and touched the other boy's arm before quickly retracting his hand and darting under the bed. But nothing happened and he quietly crawled out and stared at the closed eyes. Naruto noted the long scar over the other eye, the one normally obscured by his headband. Kakashi only took off the headband when he was going to sleep, otherwise he kept it on a lopsided angle across his face. Naruto quietly chewed his lip and wondered what he should do. Something was obviously wrong. After a while he just went to instinct. He found Kakashi's feet in the darkness, and quietly tugged on the offending boots until they dropped quietly on the floor. He quickly positioned them upright like Kakashi liked them. He then climbed up in the bed, careful to not make too much movement, and undid Kakashi's headband, placing it on the end table nearby. The dog mask was tougher to deal with as it was latched around Kakashi's neck, but he finally succeeded in figuring out how to make the strange wire stretch and release its hold. Naruto slipped off the bed and returned the dog mask to where it hung on the wall. He had to jump a few times to get it there, but he smiled as the mask was where it belonged. He then returned to staring at the older teen, still asleep and still breathing wrong. Naruto eyed the rips and the red markings on his gear. For a moment it confused him, but then he balked when he remembered what the people at the orphanage would do to him. He used to get cuts and bruises. The cuts would ooze red stuff for a short while then close up. He got closer and fingered one of the rips and saw a much larger scratch than he had ever gotten at his old home. And it was still oozing red stuff, not like with the smaller ones he received. Without thinking, Naruto prodded it a little more with his finger. Kakashi moaned a little and turned away from him. Naruto cringed and quickly backed away, thinking he had woken Kakashi. But then he let his eyes travel to his finger. The red ooze was now on his finger, and it felt funny. He quickly wiped it on his sleeve, then turned back to the prone teenager. Kakashi-sama? He poked at the teenager's back. No answer. Kakashi-sama? He still was not answered. Naruto was starting to get scared. Kakashi had to be hurt. But he was not able to tell him that for sure. Did that mean he was really hurt, or was he just really tired and ignoring Naruto? Was he bothering Kakashi? Naruto shot off for the door. He had to find Aji-san. This was not right. Kakashi normally did not ignore him. Of course he had only been there for a couple of months, maybe Kakashi was getting tired of him. Still it did not feel right and Naruto rushed out into the darkness towards the Hokage's tower. It was a pathway ingrained in his mind much like an instinct, and he darted down the darkened streets that used to scare him. When he finally arrived he was met with more darkness. He had climbed quite quickly to the windows he knew belonged to the office and stood in their frames looking around, desperately. The Hokage's office was devoid of life and most of all devoid of the old man. The old man was always in the tower, so why couldn't he find him? "What are you doing here?" The voice from behind him startled Naruto, and he fell into the office. He scrambled backwards till he hit a wall, and found himself facing someone dressed like Kakashi only with a cat mask over his face. "I'll ask again." The cat came closer. "What are you doing here?" "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was looking for Aji-san." Naruto cringed and hid his face. Sometimes ninja treated him like other people did, like they did not like him, or they wanted to hurt him. For a second things were quiet. Then Naruto froze as he felt the man's hands pick him up and set him on the chair in the Hokage's office. "The Hokage is not here right now. You'll have to come back in the morning." But Naruto looked up at the cat warily. "But Kakashi and I-san, do you mean Hatake Kakashi?" Something about what he had said caught the cat's attention. He was supposed to report a day ago. "He's running a little behind, but he's home." Naruto frowned. Maybe the cat had been told to tell him that if he came asking about Kakashi. "Wait here," the cat said briskly and was quickly out the windows again. Naruto watched him go, and sat quietly in the darkness. It was eerie and quiet in the room without the Hokage, or the sun being up. He hugged his knees to his chest and rocked a little to calm his nerves. It seemed like most of the evening had passed when finally the door opened to the office. Naruto tensed but felt greatly relieved when the old man came through the door, followed closely by Cat. "Aji-san." He leapt off the couch and latched onto the old man's leg for a second. Then he began to tug on his clothing. "Aji-san, something is wrong. Kakashi-sama came home, but he Slow down, Naruto." The old Hokage patted his head and knelt down. "If he yelled at you, you probably..." "No, he fell on his bed." Naruto frowned and actually fell back on the floor of the room to show the Hokage what he meant. "Like this, then he didn't get back up again. He didn't take off his boots or hang up his mask, and he's got red stuff on his gear." The Hokage blinked, then stood and turned towards the cat-masked guard. "Find a medic to meet me there, please. Sometimes he just gets in a state of mind to go home if he's hurt badly enough." The cat nodded and took off in an instant. The old man came and picked Naruto up carefully. "Did you touch him, Naruto?" He pointed to the red streak on Naruto's sleeve. "Hi, and he didn't move, Aji-san. He just made a noise." Naruto frowned more as he and the Hokage began moving through the tower. "It's alright, Naruto-kun. We'll go see what the trouble is together." Naruto sighed heavily and buried his head in the neck of the old man. To Naruto, the Hokage was moving way too slow and he wanted to yell at him to pick up the pace. He kept quiet though and carefully noted how many blocks they had till they arrived home. Finally, as they approached the apartment that was his, Naruto berated himself for leaving the door open. That was stupid. Kakashi would be mad to know he left it wide open after he left. "You did not leave it open, Naruto-kun," the Hokage assured him as he closed the door behind him. He had seen the child's momentary fixation upon the object, and could assume Naruto was worried about leaving Kakashi unprotected. "I told the medic to leave it for us." As they neared Naruto's room, the Hokage put him down. "Just stay here, okay? But, it's alright, just stay here." The Hokage turned and went towards Kakashi's room. He saw a strange person standing back there over the bed, and Naruto wanted to rush in and question it but stood in his doorway watching. The Hokage blocked his view standing in Kakashi's doorway, and though he could hear the quiet mutterings between them, he did not know what they were saying. He fought back a yawn and resisted going to sit on his bed. He knew if he did he might fall asleep again and miss something. The way everyone was acting, he had been right. Kakashi was hurt. He waited and finally got bored and wandered to the living room and sat heavily on the couch. It was not long till he lost the battle with sleep and found himself in dreams of when others had come to hurt him. He fought to get away but found himself surrounded. People yelling at him, throwing stones, and the orphanage workers who would grab him so hard it left fingerprints. He flinched and ran but could not seem to get away from them all. Naruto started when hands wrapped around him and fought to get away, but a soothing voice stopped him, and he woke to find himself being picked up by the Hokage, smiling sadly as Naruto blinked up at him. "There now, Naruto-kun, it's alright." The Hokage reassured the little boy, and Naruto could tell he was carrying him back towards the rooms. He winced a bit at the light now coming in the windows but did little else but allow the Hokage to carry him. He remained still as the Hokage sat on a chair next to the older teen's bed and positioned himself so Naruto could see Kakashi clearly. "Thank you for coming to find us, Naruto-kun." The Hokage stroked his hair quietly. Sometimes Kakashi doesn't know when to seek out help when he needs it. To Naruto, Kakashi looked better. He was laying on his back now, and his breathing did not seem as hitched or ragged. The way his forehead had been creased before was now smooth, and the man seemed to be sleeping for real now, not just laying there with his eyes closed. There were no more red discolorations on his gear. He was not even in his gear anymore, as he was simply in a black shirt, and was covered up to his chest by covers. He could see some of the white bandages on the man's arms and on the side of his neck. "Your teachers taught you about chakra, right, Naruto-kun?" "Hi," he nodded and wiped the sleep away from his eyes. "Everybody has chakra and everyone has different types." "Very good." The Hokage chuckled. "Well, everyone also has just so much chakra. Sometimes you can use too much of your chakra. When you do that it makes you very sick and very tired. Naruto blinked up at the old man, and then looked back at Kakashi. The old man would not be telling him this unless it was important, and the way Kakashi had fallen over that night seemed to fit the bill. Did Kakashi and I-san use too much of his chakra? The Hokage began laughing. Is that what you are calling him, Naruto-kun? It's no longer Kakashi-sama? I shouldn't call him that, should I? Naruto shrunk and frowned over at the man still sleeping. He had not called Kakashi so to his face, but he had slipped a few times tonight because he had been worried. I'm sorry, I shouldn't. Naruto-kun, I think it's fitting. The Hokage reassured him. And yes, your I-san used too much chakra. But don't worry, he'll be fine in a few days. He just needs to rest now. What about all the scratches? We took care of those, Naruto. Now you should sleep some more if you're going to go to school today. Naruto frowned and clung to the old man a bit. He had forgotten about having to get ready for school. He found his eyes drooping against his will, but he fought them harder than he had before. He wanted to make sure what the Hokage said was true, that Kakashi was alright. Or would you rather stay here today? The Hokage whispered into his hair and Naruto nodded heavily. Assured that he was allowed to stay, he drifted back to sleep. He could hear the Hokage chuckling more to himself, the sound amplified by Naruto's head resting on the old man's chest. Before he fell all the way back to sleep, he heard a whispered one-way conversation. It would seem you two were meant to be brothers, with or without Minato here to make it happen. The next few days were completely nerve-wracking. Naruto finally returned to school, mostly out of boredom, but he was paying little to no attention whatsoever. Sitting in the apartment just waiting seemed tedious, and he was sure Kakashi would be ticked if he found out he had missed too many days of class. Still, each day he would rush home only to still be by himself because Kakashi was still resting. Naruto understood what the Hokage had told him, but it still seemed worrisome that the other man had not yet awakened, even just a little bit. Naruto? Naruto looked up from where he had positioned himself in the outside practice yards during their break. He found Irika standing over him. The Chunin instructor he finally felt safe enough around was smiling down at him, stretching the odd scar across his nose even further. Naruto found he could only smile back marginally, then went back to fingering the edge of his jacket sleeve, the dark gray fabric becoming slightly worn and thin from the constant attention. What's up? Irika prodded as he sat down next to Naruto. You don't seem yourself today, I dunno. Naruto shrugged and tried to keep his face neutral, but it did not work on the more eagle-eyed Chunin. Ah, come on. I thought we were friends now. You can tell me if something's wrong. Irika met his eyes and smiled a little more to encourage him. You haven't said a word all day. Usually you're driving us nuts. Sorry. It's okay, we're just worried is all. Naruto took another glance at the Chunin. He was pretty sure there was no we, it was more of him that was worried. The other teachers seemed put off by his presence, and did little to encourage him, or even talk to him. Naruto struggled with the idea of telling Irika what had happened or not. It always seemed like he was a secret. Then again the Chunin had called him a friend. It's my Anai-san. Naruto whispered very lightly. He did not want anyone else hearing what he had just said. You have a brother? Irika acted somewhat surprised by the revelation. Well, kinda. He lets me stay with him since the orphanage didn't want me there. Naruto squirmed, uneasy by the one-on-one attention but somewhat pleased by it at the same time. Still he kept his voice to a low whisper. He's a ninja, but he kinda came home hurt. Oh, so you're worried then? Irika tapped his chin as if in thought. He's been sleeping an awful lot. Hokage-sama said he'd wake up in a few days, but he hasn't yet. Irika reached over and patted his head. Don't worry, the Hokage is usually right. Who is your brother? Kakashi-sama. Irika seemed to sit up much straighter. He seemed surprised by Naruto's admission. Naruto cringed. Maybe he should not have said that last part. Hatake Kakashi? The older man asked. Why does everyone ask that? Naruto huffed, remembering the same tone from the cat mask guard a few nights ago. I don't know anyone else named Kakashi. Good point. Irika shrugged and smiled while he scratched at his ponytail. Well, you shouldn't worry too much, Naruto, if Kakashi is your brother. He's a genius and he trained under the Yondaime himself. I'm sure he'll be fine. Irika stood and walked away, reassuming his role of supervisor, walking about making sure no one was getting into too much trouble. Naruto watched him go, smiling a little. He had not understood the sudden fascination, but he sensed the respect. He also knew who the Yondaime was, they all did. Involuntarily he glanced up at the mountainside and smiled even more. Kakashi and Aizen trained under the Yondaime. That had to mean he was a really good ninja, but the more he sat and thought about it, the more anxious he got. He goofed up a lot. He sometimes was not sure what he was doing, and unless it was Irika teaching the lesson, he was not answered when he asked the question. Maybe Kakashi would be disappointed if he did not start doing well. The thought made Naruto frown as he glanced over at the closest group of children. They were all playing and smiling, grateful for the break and the tedious work they did most of the day. Most of them had families and parents who taught them outside of school. He had watched from a distance as Sasuke showed everyone what his brother had taught him, as Choji had explained the red lines on his face, and Ino had told everyone proudly what her father was going to teach her. Naruto was still learning to read mostly. Everyone called him an idiot and teased him, but he knew better. where he lived before no one wanted him to learn anything. And it really had not changed much save for the Iruka, the Hokage, and Kakashi. Something clicked on like a light switch, and he quickly found his feet and made his way to the doors of the school, quietly sneaking away from everyone in sight. He had to catch up to everyone else, maybe even past them. He had to stop relying on everyone else and just do something. He could not screw around anymore. He had to make everyone proud of him. Maybe then they would not treat him like they did. Naruto crept into the apartment later that evening, papers and books crammed as tightly into his short arms as he could manage. No one had really bothered him on the way home, they never did, and he had been able to sneak into the library and get away with a few books before anyone had noticed. He deposited them as carefully as he could on the couch, and crawled up there as well and picked up the top book that was given to them in class. Naruto had his mind set now. He had determined while at school that he had to catch up to everyone else. The rest of the day he had been intent on listening and went about trying to pick up whatever he could. If they weren't going to help him, then he would just have to figure it out on his own. That was what he decided. So he tugged off his gray jacket, straightened out his black tee and settled the book in his lap. The first thing he was worried about was the hand signs they all were supposed to be learning and memorizing. He knew something was wrong about the way he did most of the signs because the other kids were snickering when he practiced. He opened the book to that particular section and began mimicking what he could from the pictures. Naruto was so focused and so concentrated on what he had set out to do he was not aware of his audience, quietly propped up in the hallway watching him. It had not even occurred to Naruto to check and see if Kakashi had woken up yet. It's a lot harder to learn from the books, you know. Naruto jumped and instinctively placed the book over his head. After a few moments of silence he realized it was Kakashi's voice that had startled him and momentarily he was elated. Kakashi and he stopped though and began to fidget under the surprised blink that the older teen had thrown his way. Naruto had been right. He should not have started calling Kakashi that. The man did not like it. Oto, the older man, finally said in a low whisper, and a hand placed itself on Naruto's head. Naruto smiled up at him and carefully stood on the couch to hug the taller man. Again he felt the hesitation from the other but did not look up to see it. Instead Kakashi merely ruffled his hair and reached over the back of the couch to pick up the book to see what he had been reading. Why don't you just ask your teachers to show you? 'Cause they don't show me right. It doesn't look like everyone else's. Naruto let Kakashi go and tried to take the book away but found it tightly held in Kakashi's grip. I gotta catch up. For a while nothing was said and the older man kept his gaze on the book in question, holding it in one hand, his thumb keeping the book rigid and upright. He glanced down at Naruto momentarily, long enough for Naruto to realize his headband was back in its proper place but he had not yet changed from the plain black clothing he had been sleeping in. Let me see, bird, how they showed you to do it. Kakashi finally let the book drop to his side and Naruto quickly put his hands up in what he believed was the sign. He had not gotten to that one yet so he was not sure if he was doing it right or not. By the way Kakashi's eye crinkled and he seemed to frown. Naruto could easily figure it was wrong. Carefully the older man reached over with his free hand and gently tugged Naruto's one finger into a different position and then another. Then he made the tips of his thumbs come together. Just hold that like that till I get dressed, okay Naruto? It takes a while for it to become muscle memory. Naruto creased his forehead and focused on his hands and how they were set up. But instead of just sitting there he followed Kakashi. What's that? It means your muscles will just know what to do without you thinking about it. Kakashi replied as he threw off the short-sleeved black shirt and reached for a longer-sleeved black top. It was more like the ones that he wore under his gear. Oh. Naruto watched as Kakashi went about grabbing the shirt and a flak jacket from his closet. He frowned but did not let his hands drop yet. You gotta leave again? No, but I do have to make my report to the Hokage. Kakashi reached for his dog mask but then left it hanging on the wall. I suppose I should walk. He'd be angry if I came like I normally do. He said not to let you use your chakra. Naruto nodded enthusiastically, remembering what the Hokage told him. You overdid it. So I did. Kakashi muttered, testing one of his arms, and winced as he did. What are you, a watchdog now? Yep. Naruto nodded more. Okay then, watchdog. Kakashi leaned down and poked him in the side, causing him to release his hold on the hand sign as he tried to deflect the blow. Let's go. Where we going? I assume you've eaten everything in sight by now. I was a few days behind schedule. Naruto rushed out to the kitchen, smiling. There was still food left. He had been careful to not eat it all. He opened the cabinets he could reach and smiled as Kakashi came strolling out into view. See? There's still food. I still need to report to the Hokage. Kakashi came up and shut the doors as Naruto watched. Anyway, I don't feel like cooking and you can't. Who says? I do. Ah, come on, Nisan. Naruto quickly put himself behind Kakashi and followed him out of the door. Kakashi turned and closed it and locked it. Then he stuck his hands in the vest jacket he had put on instead of the gray suit and arm protectors. They both began to walk down the long hallway of the apartment building they lived in. His step was still a little off and Naruto had no problem keeping up with Kakashi, which he normally did. Are you still tired? He questioned carefully. A little. Kakashi nodded back. I assume the Hokage told you what I did. Uh-huh. You used too much chakra. Naruto looked up at Kakashi, who kept his eyes stead and ahead. He said that was dangerous. Why'd you do that? Because sometimes you don't have a choice. Kakashi replied back. As they hit the streets, Naruto became silent. He had begun to learn if he did not make too much noise, people did not pay him attention, and so he opted for that instead of being speared with such looks. The two of them walked along in silence, keeping a steady pace through the early evening traffic of the streets. Naruto slowly began to realize their path was not headed for the tower. He looked up to Kakashi, the older man's gaze still forward and unmoving. Kakashi always did what he had to do first, so why weren't they going to see the old man? Kakashi did not look down or say a word, so they continued on till they were at the barbecue place and Kakashi was moving towards an open booth. Kakashi, is that you? Naruto ducked behind Kakashi without warning. The booming voice had startled him a bit. He found he had to keep moving though, as Kakashi was moving towards the loud voice, not away from it. Asuma, Kurenai. Kakashi put up a gloved hand and waved to whoever had called out to him. This must be a miracle. You're out in public. The male voice began and a small laugh followed. And you're not in your usual get-up. What gives? We were beginning to wonder if you were still alive. A female voice joined the conversation. No one's seen you for a while now. Sorry to disappoint you. Kakashi's voice was light and somewhat sarcastic. He was not actually sorry, Naruto could tell. He took the opportunity to peer around Kakashi's legs to get a look at who obviously recognized Kakashi. The woman's eyes settled on him as did the man's. The man was bearded and rather broad-built. The woman's eyes were red and Naruto found himself transfixed by the odd coloring. After a while the focus started to unsettle him, and he made a move to duck behind Kakashi's legs again. Who's the runt, Kakashi? Naruto flinched when Kakashi's hand stopped him from getting to safety. The gloved hand rested lightly atop his head, stopping any attempt to hide or dart away. This is Naruto. For a moment the two just blinked at Naruto, and he wished Kakashi would let go so he could hide. Apparently they had enough of staring at him because the woman frowned and took her gaze to Kakashi. Kakashi, you didn't. I did what I had to, Kurenai. Kakashi shrugged a bit. But you didn't see him. For the first time Naruto heard a bite in Kakashi's tone and he inwardly flinched. He looked up and saw the tight crease in Kakashi's brow. He was in an ally, drenched, and it looked like someone took a training sword to him. What was I supposed to do? Tell someone. The woman named Kurenai snapped back. He does seem awfully jumpy. Asuma leaned forward to inspect Naruto more closely. Kakashi sighed and pointed to the two seats beside the people he was talking with. Since you two seem bent on conversing, mind if we join you? I'm starving. Fine, whatever. The man chuckled and switched to sitting beside the woman with odd eyes, and Kakashi shuffled Naruto into the booth and trapped him there. Naruto, this is Sarutobi Asuma, and Yuhi Kurenai. Oh, like Aji-san? I hear people calling him Sarutobi too. Naruto questioned, and it earned a loud booming laugh from the man Kakashi had called Asuma. Sorry, nah, you're alright, kid. Asuma rubbed at his chin, covered in dark black hair. The man is old, it fits him nicely. A woman came up and momentarily looked in Naruto's direction. Kakashi barely gave her time though and began ordering. Asuma and Kurenai followed suit. She hurried off and again the two strangers were looking at Kakashi. So that's what you're talking about. Hi. Kakashi muttered and looked over at Naruto. Try bird again, Naruto-kun. You can't possibly be drilling him. Aura. Kurenai began to spout but then stopped when she saw what they could all easily pick up on. Kakashi reached over and this time, to Naruto's delight, he only had to fix 2 fingers. He got the thumbs right. Wait, they're showing him wrong. Kakashi responded. He asked me to show him, so I am. He was trying to get it all from the books they give you for the basic forms. How long this time? And Kakashi-san. Naruto quickly corrected himself this time, sure that Kakashi did not want to be embarrassed in front of other ninja. Till the food comes. Kakashi said lightly and then turned his attention to the other two. So? You two on some kind of date or something? What? Both proclaimed rather loudly, and Naruto tried not to laugh as a blush spread on the woman's and man's face. I found him here, just like we did you. Kurenai sputtered finally and speared Kakashi with a hard glare. Like I would date a scruffy, lazy man. Any Kakashi threw up his hands and waved them back and forth in front of him. Merely asking, you hear about Uchiha Itachi? Asuma went about ignoring the kid, seeing that it was what Kakashi was effectively doing. He had heard the same concerns from his father, from time to time, but had always brushed them off. Now he saw firsthand the effects of such abuse have had in a short amount of time. He just graduated. He's 7. Kurenai added in. The Uchiha clan is parading him around like the next big genius. He's a smart kid but he's odd. Well, the Uchiha always did press their kids hard. Kakashi muttered more to himself than the two at the table. I'm sure he's a great asset to the clan. Damn idiots, the lot of them. Asuma snorted and shook his head. Sasuke won't be any better, I doubt. I know him. Naruto's small little addition to the conversation surprised Kakashi a little. Up till now Naruto had been silent as a statue in the presence of strangers. Hell, unless the kid was with him, the Hokage, or the academy instructor who actually seemed genuine in helping, he did not make a peep. He's weird. Naruto whispered off into the silence, and put his concentration back on his hands and their positions. That's the Uchiha in a nutshell, kid. The food came, but Naruto waited until Kakashi waved him off. He let loose the seal and watched eagerly as it cooked in the middle of the table. He had not realized it before as he concentrated on his book and what he had set in his mind to do, but he had been starving as well. Finally, when the adults began to eat, so did he. Slowly he caught out of the corner of his eye Kakashi pushing more his way. He gladly accepted and smiled as he munched happily on the grilled meat. He loved when Kakashi was home or not busy. It meant actually being full and not having to cook or rummage around for something. Surprisingly, as he finished, he caught the red-eyed lady doing the same. He cocked his head at her for a moment, and she copied Kakashi's little wave of hand that usually signaled it was alright, and he smiled, muffled in arigato, and tore in. Kami, how do you keep him fed? Kurenai muttered, watching Naruto go. You don't actually cook, I know that. Kakashi merely shrugged. I put it in the cupboards, he takes it out. Seems to work well enough. Hokage-sama keeps an eye out for him, as does Ichikaru. Asuma snorted a bit in laughter but otherwise kept his mouth shut. That can't be healthy. Kurenai watched Naruto even more. Is he afraid we're going to take it from him? What? Kakashi shrugged and reached out a hand to ruffle the blonde hair. I've only had him for about 6 months, Kurenai. It's 4 years of being starved, I would assume. They didn't even have him in the academy yet. They just kept trying to get rid of him, or as the Hokage told me after the fact. Both Asuma and Kurenai could pick up the underlying threat. They could also feel the slight spike in killing intent as Kakashi talked. Both of them knew Kakashi's connection with the Yondaime, and well aware of the connection between the boy and the late fourth. They knew after that night Sandaime Hokage, forced out of his retirement, had tried his best to keep the teenager from getting himself killed indirectly. The Hokage at first assumed, like they all had, that heaping the well-being of the fourth son upon the stressed and battered teenager would have been too much. But now, watching what little interaction they could see between the two, they clearly saw a benefit in the arrangement. Kakashi seemed more relaxed and at ease, not like the uptight, hell-bent, workaholic that he was known for being. Hell, he was out in public and looking like a normal jounin, not in his usual ANBU getup. Despite both being older than the ANBU captain in front of them, Kakashi had more experience under his belt than the both of them combined, which of course could not be healthy, which explained the unofficial betting pool for when Kakashi would finally snap. In the case of the boy, the benefit was complete and utter safety. Asuma's voice had startled him at first, and he had ducked behind his guardian. Though Kurenai and Asuma had seen him with Kakashi at the start, they had waited until the blonde had shown himself to bring him up. They both had seen the slight look of panic and then disgust when the waitress had approached them, and seen Naruto. Kakashi had completely ignored it, and had not allowed her to even get one protest out. They continued on their small talk, ignoring the glares and silent threatening stares in their general direction. Seemingly oblivious to all of it, the kid finished gorging and promptly leaned over and rested at Kakashi's side. Kakashi did not flinch or turn away. He merely kept sitting there with his arms propped up on the table as they held their conversation. Once Naruto's eyes dropped shut, and he seemed asleep, Asuma picked up where Kurenai had left off. You're serious about this? You're an ANBU dope. He tried pointing out to what Kakashi must have forgotten. What does he do when you're gone? If I summon Pakin, a dog looking after a 4-year-old kid, that's... He seems to take care of himself. Kakashi cut him off. He's been doing so well at it for the past year, I can't imagine doing worse. It's only for a little while. I still think you're insane, Kakashi. Asuma ground out and flicked out a cigarette and lit it. With a little gleam in his eyes, Kakashi merely shrugged and stood, awakening Naruto, who quickly fell in line with him, bowing formally to the two they just shared dinner with. Well, then someone should inform the winner of the betting pool. Choji! Hand am over, you hoarder. No way. Get your own. Naruto launched himself at his heavier friend and they both hit the dirt streets rolling. The dirt flew around them, the dry October air having ripped any moisture the dirt had accumulated during the summer rains. It collected around the two warring boys and filtered up Naruto's nostrils a bit, causing him to snuff in retaliation. Choji did not seem the slight bit affected by the dust or the dirt and kept a tight hold on his prize, a bag of chips he had hidden away for the day, knowing full well he would not be in class later on. He ignored everything as he did his best to hold off Naruto, the only other boy in their class said to have the same appetite as him. Will you two knock it off? Choji and Naruto froze at the sound of Shikamaru, snapping in their general direction. Naruto's hands were outreached and Choji's free hand was firmly pushing Naruto away, pushing on his face. They blinked up at the dark-haired ringleader of their little cell and could see the raised eyebrow and deepening frown. Shikamaru was getting pissed at their antics. Are you honestly trying to get us caught? Shikamaru sighed heavily and turned, hands thrown behind his neck and shaking his head slowly. Both of you are troublesome, you know that? Naruto snorted and quickly darted away from Choji, who merely protected his hoard more by wrapping his arms around the bag as he stood. Naruto stuck out his tongue at the larger boy, who retaliated in kind. Both took up to following Shikamaru's meandering path through the village. Come on, Shikamaru, who's gonna care if we're not there today? Naruto slung his arms up in a manner similar to Shikamaru, scratching at a spot on his neck while glancing up at the clouds above. And if Choji would just share. Troublesome, Shikamaru huffed again. Naruto was pretty sure it was his favorite word. I can imagine a lot of people are going to care we're not there, especially without any notice from our clans. Well, that's good for me, I ain't got one. Naruto smirked evilly over to the dark-haired boy now walking to his left. Choji was only slightly behind them, wary of another assault by the ravenous blonde they hung out with. You two might be screwed though, idiot. Yep. Naruto replied in happy manner. He had gotten so used to the words slung at him by his fellow classmates, and some of his teachers that he had started adopting it. He enjoyed the stalled reaction as he merely smiled or puffed up proudly whenever someone called him an idiot or dope, and secretly he enjoyed the freedom of being able to do what he wanted without notice or concern. All the more reason they won't miss me. What worry was there? The dope could not pull anything off on his own, so he was not a threat. Troublesome idiot. Shikamaru picked up his pace, huffing in resignation at the overactive blonde. Naruto merely smirked. You know, I'm surprised you used that word. He called after sulky Shikamaru. It's so long and you gotta sound out all those syllables. Ha! Good one, Naruto. Choji chuckled and took up the spot Shikamaru had vacated. Both of them laughed more as Shikamaru faltered in his step slightly, and then sighed heavily in defeat. Naruto knew the retort was coming. He never had the last word with Shikamaru. I'm surprised you know what a syllable is. And there it was. Naruto only chuckled and shrugged. All three returned to trying to draw as little attention as possible to themselves as they headed for the grassy areas of the park. The three had little on them to identify themselves as academy students, but the threat was still there. After all, Choji and Shikamaru were from prominent, if not smaller, clans and could be recognized as such, so they had to be quick about getting to their destination and hope that the instructors would merely overlook them not being there. The three of them had met up on their way to class just a short while ago, and as they stood in an odd sort of semicircle they had come to the conclusion that it was way too nice outside to be screwing around in some boring classroom. Granted, Naruto knew this excursion merely meant Shikamaru was going to be napping in a field of grass and Choji, and he were going to be bickering over food. Choji always had it on his person somewhere, and he and Naruto always bickered about it. It was the best kind of day for the three of them. The only problem was they had not caught Kiba. They could have used Akamaru for sentry duty, but then they ran the risk of having too many missing for the instructors to overlook it. The four of them, Choji, Kiba, Naruto and Shikamaru, were easily the troublemakers of their class. Shikamaru was always sleeping or not paying attention, Choji was always distracting others with his eating, and Kiba and Naruto just liked causing trouble. Naruto more than Kiba most days, but that was because Kiba was a pansy and did not want to participate in half of Naruto's pranks. I bet he found out we were going to run and chicken out. Naruto smirked to himself, thinking of the Inuzuka who always talked big but very rarely produced. Even if they got into trouble for skipping, it was well worth it to escape the classroom for a day. They had been learning about Bushin for the past week and Naruto was starting to get frustrated with the entire process. It was not like he did not understand the concept of it. It was a very simple thing. It was just a very simple thing he was failing horribly at. So it was he who initiated their let's skip protocol by merely pointing up to the sky and the abundance of white fluffy clouds drifting along. Everyone knew Shikamaru's favorite thing to do was just to lay and watch clouds. It was a quick and quiet exchange as it always was between them. It was still something Naruto was trying to figure out though. It was an odd thing that happened about 2 years prior, but Choji and Shikamaru just started hanging around him. He was not exactly sure why, and he was not sure when it happened. He just suddenly realized there were others around who were talking to him. And whenever he asked the two about it, Shikamaru merely shrugged it off and pointed out they usually ended up in the same place when they skipped, and Choji and Naruto were alike in eating habits. It just worked out. Kiba was sometimes there and sometimes not. Naruto really did not care for him as they clashed worse than he and Sasuke did, but Akamaru was alright. He could not speak like Pakken could, but Naruto knew he was of like intelligence, and he was slightly jealous of the Inuzuka and their canine familiars. As the three of them continued the rest of their walk in quiet silence, Naruto let his attention return to everything around them. The village seemed awfully busy for the middle of the week. People all seemed to be carrying large loads or hurrying off to somewhere important. He frowned as a gnawing sensation grew in his gut. He was forgetting something. Man, I can't wait for the festival to start. Choji began happily going on beside him. Damn it, you're just waiting for the food. Shikamaru drawled on and took a quick glance down one of the main roads they were about to cross. They normally stuck the back roads to avoid too much traffic when they skipped classes. Such a trouble. I forgot about the fire festival. Damn it. Naruto knew his step faltered a bit, but he quickly tried to cover it up as a stumble on a stone, but it appeared that Shikamaru and Choji were more interested in the goings-on around them. That was fine with Naruto. He was too busy trying to pull the dark gray fabric of his coat around his deep orange shirt he was wearing that day. Sure, Naruto go with a bright color in October. What the hell was I thinking? He liked the color, and the way it clashed with the dark gray jacket he wore. Sure, it was a color he favored, but he also knew the ability to hide while wearing said color was slim to none. He merely did it to annoy the hell out of his instructors, and it was a contest of wills with Kakashi. He had proudly boasted that it should not matter what he wore, he should be able to use his ninja skills to hide regardless. Granted, he had yet to pull that off, but he was going to one of these days, and then Kakashi had no room to talk. But now, the gnawing in his gut had intensified tenfold, and he knew it was because of what Choji had inadvertently reminded him of. For whatever reason, the dislike of his person seemed to shoot up around this month, and always seemed at its peak around this particular week, and he was now parading around in a bright catch-me color. It was also his birthday in a couple of days and he hated his birthday. He pretended though not to care about anything and went back to his goofy grin and laid-back demeanor. It did him no good to freak out around Choji and Shikamaru. They arrived at their favorite spot on a hill set back in the park. Shikamaru promptly flopped himself into the grass and stared up at the white fluffy clouds above while Choji and Naruto took a seat above his head. Choji did like Shikamaru and stared upwards, but Naruto's gaze remained riveted below. The fire festival was held in October. It had been that way well before any of them had been born. But in recent years the date had been moved to correspond with the Yondaime Hokage's defeat of the nine-tailed fox demon. It was a week long even regardless, but the start date had been changed to October 10th. Of all the days, Naruto could remember thinking on more than one occasion, a demon had to attack the village that was the day it chose. He also remembered thinking more than once that it was a bit unfair, but he had learned a good time ago to just lie low during the month of October and left it at that. It was an awful month anyway. What's your favorite thing to do at the festival, Naruto? Choji was glancing over at him, stuffing his face with more of his precious chips. I don't like going. Really? Choji cocked his head to the side in confusion. Naruto tried to shrug it off. In all honesty, he had never been. When he was younger, he just kind of watched it from the windows of the apartment, and had been content with that. He was still frightened then of being out in public alone. As he had gotten out of that phase, he had attempted once when he was 6 to go after hearing all the other kids talking about it, but had been quickly deterred by a couple of the locals who had seen him heading that direction. That's odd, seems like your kind of thing. Shikamaru added, and with his eyes closed. Yeah, well, it's not. Naruto huffed back and promptly flopped back into the grass to do as Shikamaru was doing, cloud watch. When he had first accompanied Choji and Shikamaru for this particular ritual, he had been confused by it. Now he could see the draw in it. After a while his mind finally drifted from the worry and the confusion to just detailing each and every cloud and wishing he could touch them to see if they were all fluff and puff. It was a good couple of peaceful hours. Naruto finally drifted off for a nap. Clouds were boring as it was, and you could only watch them for so long before it happened, at least for him. He could hear that Choji and Shikamaru were having a silent conversation, something about their clans and an upcoming thing, but he did not really care. Choji and Shikamaru's dads knew each other well. They also knew Yamanaka Ino's father, but that girl was so insane in the head about Sasuke. Most of the girls in their class suddenly had become that way, that they did not bother to talk to her that much. Okay, maybe he cared just a little. Clans always fascinated him, and he was curious as to how that all worked out. To have a family large enough to be a clan had to be a joy. Brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, fathers and mothers, it was something he really was enamored with. He never really told anyone that, but he was glad for at least a little insight into that world. Choji and Shikamaru had given him that much without really knowing it. He always listened intently whenever they talked about family things, even though it appeared he was ignoring or daydreaming. He dreamed of a family once. Sure, he had Kakashi, but he knew well enough that Kakashi and he were not related in any way. For starters was they looked like complete polar opposites, and most of the time acted opposite also. Kakashi's family name was Hatake and Naruto's was Uzumaki, both of which he had a great deal of trouble finding any information on despite his numerous late-night trips to the libraries and record rooms. Again, no one knew about that. But then again, what was a name? They were not blood-related, but they were close enough. Kakashi had always kept an eye out on him, made sure he had things, and hell, even treated him sometimes to ramen, even though he sometimes chided Naruto on his nutritional choices. So he had decided just to give up, something he did not do lightly. Sure, he knew he had to come from somewhere, but finding said information about either of his parents had been daunting. Apparently he was not from some clan that had gotten wiped out, and his family must have just been a normal civilian family because he was out of ideas of where to look. In a way, realizing that had made him somewhat proud. It was rare for anyone from a civilian family to try to be a ninja, mostly because there was not enough experience for the person to draw on, and they lagged behind because of it. Haruno Sakura did not seem to let it bother her much, and Naruto decided not to let it deter him either. He had already decided to strive for excellence anyway because of Kakashi. The jounin he stayed with was actually quite a big deal around Konoha, as Naruto had come to see. People treaded lightly around him sometimes, and others he had seen them point and talk. Girls, he noticed, had this reaction more than anyone else. Kakashi had graduated young and obtained jounin in a relatively short amount of time, and Naruto would admit only to himself that Kakashi was pretty smart. So Naruto had to make his brother proud of him, as well as the Hokage and Irika. He was also hoping that if he began making a name for himself, maybe the civilians would stop being so hateful towards him as well. Still, he had come to a crossroads on that particular thought too. Naruto had found his newfound intelligence had not endeared him to any of his instructors besides Irika, and it actually had brought a few more glares and names. So he had quickly backpedaled and covered it up. It was a fluke. He was not really smart, he was just pretending to be, which was actually the opposite, but he could not risk it anymore. He hated how he was treated, but it seemed either way he went he was screwed. It was easier to play the idiot than it was to be smart and learn. Shadows could be your friend, as he had come to find. That was why he liked hanging out with Shikamaru and Choji. They never really pointed out his faults or his shortcomings, and when he slipped up and acted like he actually knew something, they did not say anything about it. They just accepted he was odd and left it at that. A rough feeling tongue came scraping across his cheek and Naruto started awake. At his side a white puppy sat wagging its tail happily at him. Akamaru, he muttered and reached up to scratch the ninja dog on his ears. The puppy barked and wagged his tail more and thumped his leg as a sign he liked what Naruto was doing. Geez, you guys, you could tell me you're ditching, you know. Kiba, what the hell? Shikamaru was sitting up and glaring daggers at the Inuzuka clan boy. Naruto started growling up at him as well. This was trouble, big trouble. Me? What the hell? Kiba snarled back. I find myself the lone wolf in the pack today, and you guys are out here enjoying a little sun, and I thought Naruto was the idiot. Shikamaru stood and brushed himself off. They know something's up now. What is it, lunch break, and you decided to sneak off to find us? Hi, that's right. Kiba crossed his arms in front of him and frowned. So what, we've all snuck out at lunch before. Yeah, but staggered. You just left and we never showed up. They know something's up now. Yeah, dog breath, you just screwed us over. Naruto snarled in response, seeing Shikamaru was correct. Who you calling dog breath? Kiba was down in his face, sparing the somewhat longer canines that matched his red lines on his face. Naruto merely snarled back in response. He was not afraid of Kiba, not in the least. Last I checked you were the only one with dog breath, so it must be you. Why, I oughta. Kiba lunged at him, and Naruto braced as they hit the ground. He recovered quickly enough and used his feet and their momentum to launch Kiba over him and down the hill. The dog boy hit the ground and came up snarling at him. Great, now they were going to fight. Things were going so well before Kiba had shown up. He darted when Kiba lunged at him again. He forgot about Akamaru though and found the white dog atop his head, pawing at him mercilessly and growling just as ferociously as Kiba was. Naruto really could not dislike the white dog for his protection. It was, after all, the greatest thing about dogs. They were loyal to their masters. They protected their masters. He reached up and grabbed the pup by the scruff and quickly used him as a shield when Kiba came at him again. Kiba blinked then backed off. That's low, Uzumaki. Using Akamaru like that. Hey, I was just trying to get him off my head. Naruto frowned. Anyway, it worked, didn't it? Kiba merely snarled as Naruto let Akamaru down. Shikamaru put himself between them to stop any further fighting. This doesn't help us, guys. You're always overthinking things, Shikamaru. Kiba snuffed as he picked up Akamaru and inspected him for any injury like Naruto would ever hurt the dog. He smirked a bit when Shikamaru raised his eyebrow at his insult. Probably because none of you seem to think for yourselves. Shikamaru ground out and began to pace a bit. So how long till they find us? Depends on if they notice the puppy leaving. Naruto shrugged and rubbed at his neck. He knew he had just slipped but knew Shikamaru would actually like having someone else with a valid input. Hey! What's that supposed to? He means they could have followed you here, you dolt. Shikamaru cut off the angry retort. Just great. Before they could formulate a good enough response to anything, a gray-haired Chunin cut off their escape route, smirking evilly as he did. Great, it had to be Mizuki-sensei. Naruto frowned as the Chunin strolled up to them, hands in his pockets. You four really have to work on your abilities before you can fool us. Mizuki took a glance over at Kiba. Though I should applaud how fast you realized the threat, Shikamaru. The four instinctively lined up with one another. They were used to the routine by now and had been in the same formation enough times that it was just instinct. So who was the ringleader this time? Mizuki asked as he paced in front of them. For a while no one said or did anything. It was only a matter of time though before Kiba finally raised his pointed finger to Naruto merely to get back at him for his trick with Akamaru. Naruto snarled at him involuntarily but then found that Choji also was pointing him out. Thanks, Choji. Naruto muttered over at the boy. Shoulda known. Mizuki growled as he regarded them. Alright, you four, back we go, and all of you are staying after for detention. You especially. Naruto frowned as they lined up to follow Mizuki back to the academy grounds. He knew what that meant and knew Mizuki was secretly smiling about being able to bust him. This was turning out to be a disaster of a day. When they finally arrived back at the academy, almost everyone watched them enter. Each of their classmates had these glares on their faces as they did. Naruto did not shrink but the rest of the gang did. Bets were they just screwed everyone over with their ditching and they were certainly not going to hear the end of it. The only thing that fazed Naruto in the slightest was the disapproving look from Irika. As they took to their seats, Naruto again snarled in Kiba's direction. Way to go, dog breath. Uzumaki. Naruto flinched and ducked his head. Last name used, that was bad, now that we're all present. Irika went on and all four perpetrators shared a look with one another from across their aisles. We can start with today's test. Naruto cocked his head to the side in confusion. Test? They usually were warned about these tests so they could study. A couple of the other instructors were present and handing out papers. He watched as the thick collection of paper was literally dropped in front of him. A quick glance through the top page revealed stuff he knew they did not even cover that year. Things like basic forms, taijutsu styles, and other various ninja skills. What kind of test was this? You will be given 2 hours for this portion of the exam. We will then move to illusions and a small contest if you will. Iruka continued on. He then held up a headband to them. Do well enough and you may earn one of these. Everyone in the room went dead silent at Iruka's last words. They all became transfixed on the leaf symbol on the headband. It was what they were all working towards, was it not? The silence remained for only a few more seconds before the sound of paper rustling and pencils scraping the surface filled the room. Each one of them realized they were wasting their time staring at the headband when the test was already started. Naruto himself began flipping through the pages, answering the questions he knew the answers to easily. He left the harder ones, the ones that required more thought, so he could spend more time on them after the easy questions were finished. Something still bothered him about the layout of the day. Why did they let them stay away for so long? If this was their plan all along, why not find them without Kiba? This was, at least it was being presented as, the genin exam. That did not seem right either. They all were around 8 years old. They did not give it that soon, did they? Wait, that was right, Kakashi had graduated young. Hell, he remembered something about an Uchiha graduating at 7 even though there were none of them left save for Sasuke. Naruto shook his head harshly, and put his mind back on the questions he was reading. To hell with doubt and second guessing, he had a test to pass. Kakashi stared at his front door, arms crossed, and I focused entirely on the doorknob. If anyone were to happen upon him, they would surely assume he was completely addled in the brain, and call medics. He was staring at a door, his own door. There's got to be evidence, right? He thought, darkly inspecting each section of the door, looking for any sign that someone had tampered with the hinges, the knob itself, or any other part of the simple wooden door that led to his apartment. His nice, comfortable apartment that he should be enjoying after being let loose early, but instead here he stood. For Kami's sake, I may be you, and I'm worried about what he did to a door, Kakashi berated himself. Anyways, he's used to me going through the window. If he did something, that's where it is. Or inside the apartment itself. I swear if he touched my books again, I'm wringing his neck. Kakashi finally growled, reached out and forced the door open. He waited a few minutes inside the door, and found his door still upright. He was not covered in anything, and it was quiet inside the home. He let out a little sigh, moved about his business, taking off his gear and finding a good spot to read in. It was a sad fact that he, of all people, was afraid to enter his own apartment. No, afraid was the wrong word. Apprehensive fit the situation much better. It started easily enough, though Kakashi was still not sure why it had occurred to the kid to take the pins out of the door hinges, but he had, and when he returned home that night he found himself literally holding up his own door. From that day forward the pranks had just escalated and moved on to different targets. There was the creative rearranging of his precious books, and he was pretty damn sure the kid was going through things he was not supposed to be touching. Naruto was creative and destructive with his newfound confidence, and it was staring to wear just a bit thin. The kid had too much idle energy, and despite the fact he should be wasting it all at school, he came home with just too much. Still, there were times when he heard of Naruto's other targets that he had to give the kid some credit. Anyone that could replace all of Asuma's cigarettes with candy sticks and not have the jounin notice till he tried to light one deserved some praise. That took skill, patience, and a creative spark that a lot of the kids in this batch lacked. Of course, maybe Kakashi should not have pointed out where his fellow jounin lived. Kakashi finally released the light gray armor and went back to his kitchen, reaching for some fruit still out on the counter in a bowl. Kami knew when that showed up, but it had and still looked edible. He had not found evidence that Naruto had even been back to the apartment since early that morning. That had to mean the apartment was safe. Usually Naruto only came up with the elaborate pranks when he had too much time to himself. Of course, that means the prank happened at school and he got caught. Kakashi sighed heavily and took a bite of the fruit, taking down his mask and taking a quiet moment to observe everything around him. For the most part, everything was in its place and things were neat and orderly. Surprising knowing that behind one of the doors it was like a hurricane hit. Still, as he always told Naruto, that was his space, he could do as he wanted. Just as long as it did not affect him, he was fine with it. A year or so ago he kind of wished he had amended that rule. Kakashi was about to take another bite of his procured snack and head for the living room with one of the new books Jiraiya had sent him when the door came flying open. The aforementioned blonde came storming past, and did not seem to recognize Kakashi was even there. Stupid test, stupid Kiba, stupid Sasuke, he was snarling rather devilishly as he slammed the door behind him and stalked past the kitchen to his room, throwing the door open to give a small glimpse to the havoc behind the door. Scrolls and books littered the floor and any surface save for the bed and the windowsill, which was full of little plants. Kakashi watched a little shocked by the sudden appearance, but then shrugged, put his mask back in place, sat the apple aside and was content to let the kid mope. Whatever had gotten him caught must have been good, because he was about 2 hours late, and he was in a spectacular mood. It was mere minutes later when Naruto reappeared, pulling on his jacket over now black shirt, different from his previous orange, and dragging a bag behind him full of some of his scrolls and assorted other items like kunai and shuriken. Kakashi did the responsible thing and cut Naruto off at the pass before he could even reach the door. Okay, weaponry is involved, I gotta ask? Kakashi pointed behind the blonde when Naruto's deep blue eyes glared up at him with a pretty good dose of seething. Kakashi was preventing him from whatever he had put to his mind to, and he hated when people kept him from things. Spill it. Oh, come on, Nissan. Move it. Naruto threw up his hands in frustration, letting his bag drop to the ground. I gotta get out somewhere and start practicing. Not to mention to dodge the lovely week it is about to be. Oh, that's it. Why the sudden fascination with practicing with kunai and shuriken? You were always more fond of ninjutsu. Kakashi did his best to distract the kid. Whenever Naruto got worked up he would do crazy things. Sometimes he could head them off before they became a reason to have a talk with the Hokage, but there were a few incidents that involved the hospital because the kid tried something he had found accidentally, as Kakashi pointed out in their apartment. "'Cause I sucked it up real good on the exam today. And of course I failed Bushin again and everyone's pretty sure I'm retarded or something." Naruto began rattling and began digging through the cloth bag he kept for his pranking materials. Kakashi should be somewhat relieved that was not what was occupying the bag, but somehow it did not ease his mind any. "And that stuck-up Uchiha thinks he's superior to everyone else. Pretty sure you said something about Kiba too." "Grrr Kiba." Naruto snarled and rolled his eyes and shook his head. "Stupid mutt got us caught. Doing what, might I ask?" "Skip crud." Naruto deflated a little and took a glance at him. "Look, we did not know it was going to be the genin exam today." Kakashi snorted a bit and shook his head. So it was not a prank that had gotten Naruto in trouble. He had been skipping with Kakashi could guess Naro and Akimichi. "Can't imagine why they wouldn't miss 3 of you. You 3 should know better by now. Anyway, they couldn't possibly have given you the genin exam, you're too young." "Yes they did." Iruka-sensei held up a headband and said if we did well enough we might get one of those. "What else could it have been?" Naruto scrunched up his face and cocked his head at one side. "There were some wicked hard questions on there that I don't think any of us have even covered yet." "I worded that wrong." Kakashi reached up and rubbed at the bridge of his nose. Was this not supposed to be the start of a weekend for him? It probably was the exam. They just did not expect any of you to pass it. Then why did they give it? It's a proficiency test of sorts. To see where everyone is skill-wise. There have been people who graduated young. Naruto pointed and Kakashi could guess he was referring to Kakashi himself. There are some exceptions to that standard, of course. All the more reason to start practicing. Naruto snuffed and picked back up where he was only to meet with his forehead in Kakashi's outstretched hand. He growled a little, as he did sometimes when he was really frustrated, but Kakashi stood firm and he soon found himself in a staring contest with a blue-eyed imp. After a good 5 minutes he started to see that Naruto was indeed calming a bit, so he released him but still stood in his way to the door. "Alright, how about a compromise? I'll take you somewhere to practice since that's what you've got set in your mind to do. But you gotta calm down before we get there. Emotions are detrimental to a ninja when he is on a mission. It makes you make mistakes and overlook things. And only for a couple hours. I am not explaining to Hokage-sama how you ended up hurting yourself again with another one of your wild training regimens. Fine." Naruto crossed his arms in a semi-pout, but he did seem acceptable to the idea. Kakashi sighed heavily and turned on his heel to go back out the door. He was sure he only came in 10 minutes prior. Naruto got out in front of him as they hit the streets. His head was up, his shoulders were set, and for the most part he forged ahead like he knew where they were headed. It was a far cry from the small boy that used to be Kakashi's shadow glancing around nervously for the hidden dangers he knew resided in the shadows. "Turn right." Kakashi motioned when Naruto, predictably, started heading for the academy training grounds. Naruto blinked back at him for a moment but did as he was told. His pace slowed slightly as he let Kakashi catch up and regain a little of the lead so he could better guide where they were going. When they got to the gated areas of the training grounds, Kakashi entered it like he did all the others, like he owned it, and waited patiently for Naruto to do the same. Naruto stood on the other side blinking up at it unexpectedly, then to him. Kakashi, I'm pretty sure we're not supposed to go in there." It was true that it was a rule that students should not enter the training grounds. It was done mainly to protect them because who was to say some jounin was not currently using the area? Students had special areas near the academy set up for that use. But he also knew if with a proper guardian they could enter. Not every clan had sprawling estates and whole sections of the village to themselves like the Uchiha and the Hyuga did. "When has that ever really stopped you?" Kakashi asked back over his shoulder as he turning and began heading further in. He at least pocketed his book before they left the apartment. If Naruto decided this was a risk not worth taking, he could find a nice shady tree to read under for a few hours. That was his plan either way, actually. Kakashi heard the familiar clink of the metal fencing as Naruto came up and over. He landed lightly on the other side and looked up at Kakashi expectantly. Kakashi merely continued on his path and let the kid follow. Once Kakashi found the place he had in mind, he positioned himself at a tree and pulled out his book. Naruto merely stood by and glanced around him in silent awe. This was a different environment for the kid. The training grounds near the academy were more structured and walled in. There were set limits to them and specific uses. This, however, was complete open ground with trees and various other terrains. To a kid it would seem limitless, as they had left the gate perimeter quite a while ago. It only took Naruto a few moments to realize just what Kakashi was allowing him to have. And with a slight throw of his bag towards Kakashi, he was gone. He just shot off to explore and do whatever he was fixing in his mind to do with his practicing. Kakashi relaxed and enjoyed the weather and the second book in Jiraiya-sama's series. Honestly, the Sannin was one of the most feared people in the ninja world, but he spent his time writing books. Very good books, yes, but books nonetheless. Really should thank him for keeping me in mind. Kakashi smirked happily, getting back to the passage that he had left last night. Every so often the kid would drop nearby, scavenge through his bag and then dart off again. He had this wicked grin on his face and Kakashi would merely eye him when he was in range then return to reading. Naruto would ask for his help when he finally wanted it, and Kakashi was okay with that arrangement. Or he thought he was because after a good hour or so he found himself stealthily taking to the trees and searching out what it was the boy was actually doing. There in a thick set of trees was Naruto, doing what he said he was going to do in an off sort of way. He had used something to make mini targets on each one of the trees in front of him. Apparently he had left enough of his pranking supplies in the bag to make them. Each target had kunai expertly stuck in and around the centers of the self-made targets. Naruto also had a few dozen scrolls out around him, and seemed as if he was practicing a said thing. Kakashi grinned a bit, and took one of his own kunai and casually threw it, aimed half-heartedly for the boy's ankle. As predicted, Naruto dodged, but as he did a kunai came flying at him. He leaped a few times and tried again, and each time Naruto was dodging as he should and retaliated in kind. One particularly good throw nearly scrapped Kakashi's shoulder, and he smirked a bit. He had been too lax in testing and had nearly given Naruto a win. Kakashi was confused as to why Naruto believed he sucked up that portion of the exam, but apparently the blonde wanted something more out of his performance. Or he just flat out faked it all. Kakashi frowned. Naruto was by no means stupid. But almost everyone in his class, save for the few exceptions, called him such. Kakashi had noticed it as well. In most instances Naruto played the part of a goofy, overactive, hyper kid. Back at home, however, Kakashi knew differently. Naruto studied a lot. He would hold himself up for hours if left unchecked. He would go out and experiment on his own, sometimes late, and come back looking either utterly defeated or absolutely proud of himself. Naruto knew more than he let on he did, and Kakashi sometimes found himself to wonder why. Of course he could figure out it was a coping mechanism. There were still those who would, given the chance, do harm to the boy. And as a young boy Naruto had done everything he could to keep himself off of their radars. Naruto had been quiet and subdued. Now he realized he liked talking and having those bonds with others, but displaying any amount of skill usually got him reprimanded. It had to be confusing. Still he was unsure how to deter the double life the boy was making for himself. He had told him numerous times just not to care what others said or did. It still happened. Maybe he believed it was too far past time to stop the charade and kept up with what was normal now. It was so hard to drop a mask once you got a hold on it. Ni-san, you finished with that book already? Naruto called up at him after a few minutes, smirking wildly as he did. Kakashi dropped from his position and ambled up to the mini maelstrom around the boy. One thing was certain, he was not stupid, but he had an interesting way of going about things. It never was an exact straight line for Naruto. He would be on one task and that task would suddenly trigger a realization. Distraction seemed to best work with him. No, but remember I told you only for a while? It's only been an hour, Ni-san. I'm not tired yet. Naruto flashed his big grin and moved to retrieve his kunai to throw again. No, he would not be tired yet. That was not Kakashi's implication. He began to slowly piece all the clues together. All the pranking, all the experimenting, all the idle energy that was driving Kakashi nuts when he was in a confined space with Naruto. Naruto more than likely had a much larger pool of chakra to throw around. Not altogether surprising, and not because of the fox. The Yondaime Hokage was well known for two very distinctive jutsu, and both of which, depending on the range, were chakra intensive. Hi, I know that. Kakashi straightened and tugged out a little scroll from one of his flak jacket pockets. It was another thing he had been pondering at length. He had been thinking of retiring as ANBU, which would mean returning to Jounin status and taking up just normal missions as dished out by the Hokage. It opened up the possibility also of being gone for long tracks of time. Some of the missions that came through the Leaf Village were pretty length ones. I just thought you might want to try something new. As always, Naruto's eyes focused in like a hawk. He always wanted a challenge, and giving him something new might be worth the headache it could be later. He was holding on to it till Naruto's birthday, but he supposed that was in a few days anyway. This was his and Pakin's solution. Hopefully it worked. Dog, monkey, bird, sheep. Naruto's hands fumbled through the seals unsteadily. He honestly was not even sure he was doing it right, but he was out of options at this point. The angry voices of the drunks who had decided to take up chasing him echoed through the empty alleys. Naruto was currently hiding behind a small lip created by two meeting buildings and was trying desperately to get the jutsu to work. Damn his pride and courage. Damn this always happening on the 10th. For as long as he could remember, people were always mean to him, and on some occasions wanted to hurt him, but it seemed particularly bad on this day of days. If only he had done like all the other festivals and his birthday, he would not be in this predicament right now. Damn Choji and Shikamaru for actually asking if he was going to show up. He accidentally had told them he might, and he would see them there. Now he had to go to the festival. It would just look weird if he did not. Naruto cursed at his hands, trembling and bleeding from a gash further up on his arm. Dog, monkey, bird, sheep. It was not altogether a hard concept, but apparently it was because it was not working as intended. Hey, I think I saw him down here. Someone yelled in very close proximity to where he was, and Naruto fought hard to not just dart away again. He should not even be fiddling with something he had not even perfected, or even gotten right yet. Stick to what works, dodging and running. But now he was back in a corner, and panic caused him to stay on course with his chosen action. Dog, monkey, bird, sheep. Work, damn it. Work. When he slammed his palm to the ground this time, a puff sounded in his ears. He closed his eyes and prayed it was Pakin. The pug would know exactly what to do or where to run. Naruto assumed that Kakashi had taught him the seals for the summoning jutsu so he could summon Pakin. When he let up and stood back, he was surprised to find a larger dog sitting there in front of him. It had a brown body with a black back and pointed ears. The dog whined a little and nudged his hand while they stared at one another. Naruto laid his hand on the dog's head uncertainly, and the dog barked happily. Well, at least it worked. Naruto mumbled mostly to himself. Down this way. A man's voice drew Naruto's attention back to the crisis hand, and he made his way to the street. Just as he got out of his hiding spot, someone came at him from the side and took a good swing at his head. Naruto ducked that one, but another of the man's companions was nearby and came at him from behind. Naruto felt the strike and hit the ground. His vision blurred a little and he cursed at himself. He had been too slow to respond to a threat, and now he was in for it. No wonder Mizuki-sensei had praised Shikamaru for realizing something so fast. Wait too long, and you were screwed. Another hand reached down and grabbed him by the collar of his shirt, and yanked him up harshly and threw him into the wall of the alley. He cursed as his head hit the hard brick surface and fought hard to keep his vision clear enough. Damn it, move! Do something! Anything. Naruto berated himself, but found himself paralyzed by one lone statement that he heard from day one at the academy. Do not harm civilians. In no circumstances would it be okay to harm civilians. And so he froze like a timid creature, unsure what to do. They were drunk, he could smell it on them rather harshly, and they were violent, but they were still civilians. Suddenly the man who had him held up by his shirt let him go, and he hit the ground. Naruto curled up and held his head, feeling a slight bit of stickiness when his hand hit the spot that hurt the most. Instead of feeling any more attacks, he heard snarling, a deep growling full of threat. He looked up, fighting off the dizziness that just would not clear, and saw the dog he had summoned moments ago standing between him and the men. It stood rigid and it was baring its teeth. His hair was standing on end and he looked like a rabid animal. Oh? A new trick of yours? The man who had knocked Naruto to the ground initials muttered. We're not afraid of Samut. A hand reached out to snag at the dog's scruff and it yelped a bit but dodged the man and lunged for the group. The men scattered a bit, surprised by the sudden attack by the animal. The surprise was soon turned to anger and their focus turned on the dog. Naruto curled back up and tried to keep his head still. Kami, Kakashi was going to be so pissed about this. Naruto tried to drown out the yells and the commotion caused by the fight. After a while they began to die down. His head was throbbing more and more and he cursed under his breath. When things were finally all silent again, he pulled his hand away and saw the bit of blood covering his right hand. Apparently the man had thrown him hard enough against the wall to cause damage. A low whine caused Naruto to start, and he involuntarily jumped a little. There in front of him sat the black and tan dog, a little worse for wear, but still there. The dog whined again and put his nose to Naruto's nose and the two stared at each other for a long time. You're not Pakin. Naruto finally managed to say, wincing as he tried to keep the dog in focus. He reached out though and scratched between the pointed ears. I don't think I've ever seen you with Kakashi's dogs before. The 8-year-old started when a bright red tongue snuck out of the black muzzle and licked his face. The dog whimpered and rubbed his head against Naruto's neck and licked him again. It's okay, boy. Naruto whispered and continued to pet the dog. I heal up pretty quick. I was just hoping to get Pakin so I could find Kakashi or Aji-san. The dog merely cocked its head at Naruto. His straight ears flopped to the side, his head went, giving him an almost comical look. Do you know Kakashi-san? The dog shook his head no and lay with his head in Naruto's lap. Naruto was utterly confused now. Kakashi had taught him how to summon his nin dogs so that if Kakashi was on a mission, Pakin or the others could keep him company or protect him. But this dog was not one of Kakashi's. Naruto was sure of that now. Naruto stood slowly. The dog did so beside him, whining as Naruto reached out to steady himself against the walls. He could not shake the dizziness or the pounding in his head and he cursed mentally for allowing himself to get caught. He should have just stayed home. Well, I guess I'd better come up with a name for you. I can't just keep calling you dog. As he limped to the edge of the alley he had been in, he could see little spatters of blood on the street. He wondered if it was his or his newfound companions, or even worse, his attackers. He peered out of the alley cautiously to see if anyone was waiting this time, and he saw only dimly lit streets and dark houses. That was good. Most people were now at the festival and would be properly distracted. Now he just had to find his way home, which at this moment he was finding difficult to concentrate on. He took a couple more glances then ventured out, moving slowly to minimize the pounding in his head. His dog barked, startling him a bit. It was a deep sound, almost threatening, but Naruto could tell it was merely trying to communicate with him. Naruto smiled a little, remembering how the dog flung himself at the crowd of men, ready to defend Naruto against them. He patted the large head that came up to nearly his mid-waist. How about Ririshii? I'll call you Riri for short? He felt the tail of the dog hit the back of his legs and the happy panting at his side. Naruto grinned and they both limped out into the street. Okay Riri, nice to meet you, I'm Naruto. The dog barked again in response. Naruto thought Riri sounded happy and he was happy too. At least he had pulled of the summoning. He just did it in a way he did not think Kakashi was thinking. They walked along slowly, the dog keeping itself right up against Naruto, allowing the boy to reach out when needed to steady himself. Naruto stopped at a bench near a store that looked like it was closed. He cursed and ran his hands through his hair and rubbed at his temples. Damn, that man had hit him hard and followed up with a slam against the wall. His head was very angry. He had hoped once he gotten upright and moving the pain would lessen, but it only got worse and he was feeling a bit drowsy now that he had stopped again. And though he was sure he was on the right path to home, he still felt doubt about it. He was confused about it, but as he looked up at street signs he was reminded that he was indeed on the right track. Why it still bothered him remained a mystery. Maybe he should just stay there on the bench. Eventually someone would come looking for him, right? Kakashi usually got too worried he was starting trouble if he was gone too long, and he'd come looking. Riri's loud bark startled him back up. He had not realized his eyes had drooped closed, but they had. Riri had grabbed hold of his jacket sleeve with his teeth, and was tugging gently on his arm. He whined and pulled until Naruto stood again and shook his head. Yeah, you're right, Riri. Knowing my luck, someone else would find me, not an Ai-san. He muttered darkly and took back up to walking home. As they finally reached the apartment he stayed in with the older jounin, Naruto fumbled with his keys. Damn, which one of these was it again? Should not be this hard. He had two, one for the door and one for the little lockbox of stuff he kept in his room for his research. Maybe he should get rid of the one for the lockbox. He had given up finding anything in that respect anyway, had he not? Before he could grasp the right key, the door came open. Naruto froze and his hand instinctively grabbed the thick scruff of Verishii. The dog began growling again and positioned himself so that most of his body was in front of Naruto. For a few agonizing moments he thought that they had found out where he lived and had just waited for him to come home to finish what they had started. Naruto relaxed immediately though when he realized it was just Kakashi standing there. What have you been? Kakashi was staring to say to Naruto when he had opened the door. The silver-haired man had stopped though once he had gotten a good look at him. What happened? Naruto sighed and released Verishii. He walked in past Kakashi with Riri right at his heels. He really was starting to feel shitty, so he began to head for the bathroom. He knew where everything was by now and needed some aspirin and maybe some bandages. Come here, Naruto, Kakashi ordered. The older man had followed him up to this point to the kitchen. He must have seen the back of his head, which Naruto was sure looked worse than it was. Head wounds always were bleeders, even with just a little scratch. He flashed a grin at his brother in an effort to reassure him. It's okay, Ai-san. No, it's not. Come here. The older man snagged him by the sleeve of his coat and pulled him closer. He gently forced Naruto's chin down to his chest, and he felt the jounin's fingers gently brushing back his hair to look at what had caused the bleeding. Look at me. Naruto complied with the order this time and found the one gray eye looking intently at his eyes, which was a little confusing. It's a wonder you're not unconscious, Kakashi was muttering as he went back to looking at his head. That hurts. Naruto fidgeted and tried pulling away but found himself tightly held. I think I might have blacked out a bit, but it's okay. Riri stayed with me. Kakashi's when I traveled down to the black and tan dog sitting at Naruto's feet. It was a beautiful German shepherd, if not a little roughed up itself. It was, however, a dog he had never seen before. Riri, huh? Kakashi said as he released Naruto and pointed at a chair. He started for the bathroom this time to get the things Naruto was probably going to get for himself, but he found it easier to just comply with the older man than to fight him. He was dizzy anyway. Just where did Riri come from? I was trying to summon Pakken, Naruto answered when Kakashi returned. The boy was sitting at the counter looking sheepish. I got Verishii instead. Kakashi blinked at him, and his eyes traveled between the German shepherd and the boy. He had just taught Naruto the hand seals for the summoning a few days ago. Had he really grasped it that quickly? Even more, Pakken was the only one that had agreed to sign a contract with the boy. The theory was if he did the jutsu only the little pug would answer him. Instead he had summoned one of his own dogs. Verishii is his full name, I take it. Kakashi tried to shake it off. He would have time to test the boy later to see if he could do it a second time when he was not under attack. He took to cleaning the cut on the back of the boy's head and bandaging it to stop what little blood still seeping from the open part of the gash. That's what I named him, Naruto hissed when he applied pressure to the back of his head. Pakken will be jealous. Kakashi smirked a bit. He placed the things away and began assessing anything else he could find wrong with the kid besides the obvious concussion. Why didn't you run? 'Cause there were a lot of them, they kept ambushing me. For drunks they were awfully perceptive, Naruto muttered and looked away. I know I'm a horrible ninja, but, well, if that were the case I don't think Riri would be here right now, do you? Kakashi crouched down and looked the animal over. He too looked like he had been on the losing end of a fight. The shepherd licked his hand and nudged it as if inviting him to pet him. Well, I guess not. And you would be higher at the academy if you would stop being the class clown and skipping all the time, wouldn't you? Kakashi continued on and stood again to stare at the kid. I know why you do it, Naruto, but it obviously doesn't help matters, does it? No, Naruto frowned and again ducked his gaze away to focus on the dog sitting right up against his legs. The dog was being very attentive to the boy and his state, despite looking haggard itself. For a moment things were silent. Kakashi watched as Naruto blinked and tried to clear his vision, Again another point in the he has a concussion column. Ugh, I'm getting some aspirin and going to bed, Naruto said as he stood to go about his plan. Kakashi quickly reached out and stopped him. Oh no you don't. Kakashi pushed him towards the living room and ignored the fairly nasty snarl directed at him when he did. He knew better. Aspirin was bad for people with concussions just on the principle if it was bad enough it would trigger more bleeding. He did not think the kid had that bad of one. He said he was only out for a couple of seconds, and though he seemed to have trouble with his balance, his speech was clear and he was able to carry on a conversation well enough with Kakashi. But, I think you have a concussion. No aspirin and no sleep, not just yet. Unless you want to go to the hospital to make sure, then you can have both. Naruto frowned and sat sulking on the couch. Kakashi had known using the H word would make the kid comply. Naruto hated that place. Not that Kakashi could blame him much, so did he. Uptight nurses who thought they knew how you felt regardless. He sat down nearby and took back up to reading but also keeping an eye out on the 8-year-old. Riri came in and lay at the foot of the couch, his large head landing with a quiet thump when he did. Kakashi still could not figure how the dog was here, but he could always worry about it later. The jutsu had worked as intended, just with a different result. He heard the quiet mutterings and saw the kid subconsciously clutching at his head. Oh sure, Kakashi knew it probably hurt like hell. He had on more than one occasion suffered through the same thing. So he quietly reached over and placed his one arm around the kid's shoulder and just let it rest there, quietly rubbing at the shoulder it landed on. He hoped, as it was with anything else with Naruto, maybe distraction would work. Every so often he would lightly flick the kid in the shoulder, whenever he thought Naruto was drifting to sleep. He just wanted him to be awake for an hour or two, just to make sure he was right, and it was only a minor concussion, but he knew the kid's head and the injury would make him want to sleep. I shouldn't have tried to go, I should have just stayed here, Naruto muttered at one point, his eyes drawn out the windows and towards the part of the village the festival set up in. Kakashi looked that way as well. I didn't even do anything this time. I don't know what I did. I didn't prank anyone, I didn't say anything. Kakashi frowned and subconsciously clutched a little tighter. I don't understand it, and I-san. Neither do I, Naruto. Kakashi lied and he felt really guilty the moment he did, but part of his self was still loyal, and a rule follower. He could not, in good conscience, break the rule the third had made. In all likelihood it would only make things worse. Much like Naruto and his goofy persona, it was far too late to back out now. I think it's safe if you want to go to sleep now. It was the coward's way out, Kakashi knew it, but he saw no protest as Naruto rose and started back for his room. Ririshii followed and it made Kakashi notice. Oh, and you can tell Riri it's okay to go back now. I'll let Iruka know you won't be there tomorrow, but you're not going to want to move, Naruto. Just go. Naruto complied this time and headed into his room, leaving the door open this time. The one thing that Kakashi did not hear, however, was the familiar poof that accompanied a release summons. Kakashi gave it some time before standing and walking towards Naruto's room to peer inside. Naruto was now asleep. His one arm lay carefully across his chest and a pained look was plastered across his face. Riri had jumped up into the bed with the boy and his large head laid below Naruto's hand, rising and falling with each breath the boy took. Kakashi wondered why in the world the kid would not defend himself or use what he knew to escape, but perhaps something held him back from that. It was worrisome and Kakashi cursed. He was getting way too attached here, too late for that I suppose. Crafty old man, he thought as he scraped a small part of his thumb and summoned Pakin, hoping to not wake either the boy or the dog. He pointed to them both when the pug looked up at him questioningly. Explain that, Pakin. He whispered and the pug focused on the pair in front of him. Well, I'll be. Pakin chuckled a bit and inched forward. He actually summoned his own dog, not me. I thought he only signed the contract with you. Kakashi frowned a little. And why is he still here? Well, that's what we thought we did. It was only theory. Pakin muttered and saw the German shepherd perk up and glance at him. Of course it is entirely possible he is not actually a summon. Naruto might have flubbed this entirely and made a familiar. That makes a little more sense. Kakashi crossed his arms and stared. It was still very unlikely, but it held more merit than a random dog summon coming out of nowhere without a contract. That doesn't explain why he's still here. Pakin huffed loudly and smirked up at him. I thought you were smart. If he's a familiar, we're stuck with him. If he's a summon, well then I guess he's a lot like us. Have we not stayed at your side when you were hurt, Kakashi-san? Pakin referred to himself and the 7 other dogs Kakashi called his own. Have I not kept watch when you needed me to? Kakashi sighed and closed his eyes. Pakin had him there. Perhaps Naruto needs this dog like he needed me once. Pakin said very quietly in hopes of not offending. Kakashi nodded and turned away. He knew what Pakin referred to and it stung a little, but it was truth. He had pleaded with Pakin to stay nearby after what his father had committed, all those years ago, and the little pug had done so up until Minato-sensei had taken him in. In some ways he was hoping that Pakin was right. That this dog was a familiar, not a summon. Part of him had been guilty teaching the boy because he would like to assume that like his father Naruto would be more inclined to summon toads. But without that said contract he could not teach him so. That required Jiraiya, and Jiraiya had not set foot back in Konoha for nearly 9 years. If this dog was not a summon from the dogs, then it meant Naruto was still free to discover his own contract. But how he had completely screwed up a jutsu with set hand signs and created a familiar was beyond Kakashi at this hour. It was possible, just completely random, and unlikely. Of course this was Naruto. He was about as random as they came. Maybe Asuma was right. I am insane. Still he took a glance back and smirked. It remains very interesting. Kakashi, where are we going? Kakashi smirked as they walked along in relative silence up till this point. He had drugged the kid out of bed that day and told him to get dressed already. He had been in bed long enough, and his head should be fine. As predicted the day after the incident, as it was now being called, Naruto had not moved. He had quickly woken, shut his blinds, complained about the light and all the noise and buried himself in a heap of blankets trying to dull the overstimulation. That was 2 days ago, and now he was pretty sure the kid was moping. And they could not have that. So he got him up, headed out the door, and just started walking. Naruto did as predicted and followed, either out of pure curiosity or pure instinct. Kakashi did not answer him and just kept on, his hands in his pockets. He had a plan in mind, but he was sure that Naruto at first was not going to like this. He was going to balk like a timid deer when he finally figured out their destination. Even though Kakashi had heard the hint of wanting in the admittance a few nights prior, he knew Naruto was going to balk. I shouldn't have tried to go, I should have just stayed here. And of course Kakashi knew what he meant. He meant the fire festival. So as a test he was leading him right into the maw of it. It was the weekend by now and the festival would be at its height, and Kakashi figured safety in numbers. A good deal of people he knew would be around enjoying, but if they saw him, and subsequently Naruto, they would probably also keep an eye out. Oh come on Nissan. Naruto whispered vehemently. I don't like surprises. Oh sure you do. Kakashi reached over and ruffled his hair, albeit lightly. You certainly like surprising people. It's different. Naruto pouted a bit but kept on beside Kakashi, keeping an eye on the streets they passed and the lack of vendors or shoppers. When they hit the area around the Hokage Tower, Naruto did as expected and balked. No. Kakashi pretending not to hear him at first, but he had heard the quick and decisive tone the boy's voice took. Hell no. Naruto shook his head. I'm not stupid. I'm not going. They don't want me there. Kakashi stopped and regarded the tense stature the blonde had taken. He was absolutely rigid, and he could see his one hand tapping insistently on the side of his leg. Are you nuts? I'm not supposed to go, I'm okay with that. No, you're not okay with it. Kakashi muttered and pointed behind him. And I don't remember any rules barring anyone from this particular event, so you are allowed to go if you want. Except for the actions of a few deviants. Kakashi cut him off. If you allow them to keep bullying you, it will only get worse, Naruto. Kakashi paused and watched. Naruto's eyes predictably went behind him to the activities being held at the festival. By now he should have heard from classmates and others about what happened. There were games, there was food, and other entertainment. And even though he was training to become a ninja, he was still just an 8-year-old kid. That had to hold some appeal to him. Anyways, I'm right here, aren't I? Kakashi offered up. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Naruto's deep blue eyes turned back up to him and searched a lot like they did a few years ago. Unlike then, however, some of the tension melted away and Naruto looked again behind him to the festival. A few more minutes and he finally began walking forward. Kakashi merely began to shadow the kid. 10 more minutes and he was slowly starting to relax more. Naruto was actually moving more freely and looking about in curiosity. And then, just as Kakashi had hoped, someone took notice of him, in a good way. See, I knew you came. Akimichi Choji came up to them, ignoring Kakashi and slugging Naruto in the shoulder. Hey! Shikamaru! I found him! Choji began waving wildly across the way and Kakashi caught sight of the Nara kid. Quietly Kakashi slipped the money he had on him in Naruto's pockets, while Naruto was busy panicking about the amount of attention Choji was drawing, and then silently stepped back. With Nara there were a handful of others from their class, and they all crowded around to see if it really was him, and asking him where he had been. Shikamaru started goading him, then taking the lead through the rest of the festival, told Naruto where they were headed and to come on already. Naruto looked for Kakashi. Kakashi noted it, but he had already taken up residence on a rooftop. Naruto looked around for a moment in confusion, then blinked up at him, and Kakashi waved him off. Naruto hesitated a little before rushing off to catch up with the others. Kakashi kept his promise of being nearby. He was enjoying the quiet walk through the festival but kept himself alert to any threat that could present itself. Like Naruto, he had not ever come to this particular celebration but for far different reasons. The first couple of years it was like a tribute to the late Yondaime, and his defeat over the demon fox. As much as he preached keeping emotions at bay for the sake of missions, he really could not face the loss year after year. Even more so when he found out how the people of Konoha were treating his sensei's sacrifice. But now it seemed that it had returned to its roots a bit. It was really meant to be a big festival all around the Fire Country, thus the name. But of all the small villages and estates around the country, Konoha was the only one to celebrate it this particular week. Naruto for the most part seemed to enjoy himself after the initial paranoia died down. He became more relaxed and took on his mask, but Kakashi could see a little cracks in the persona when he joked around with Nara. Kakashi had been hearing rumors about the lazy kid from a few people, but a few theorized he was actually very smart. He could see it with the two of them taking shots at one another. They both enjoyed the intellectual mind game they had going. The rest of them did what most kids did when let loose in things like this. Played the games, got as much junk food as they could, talked with one another and the like, all the while most of them were unaware of their silent chaperone. Most of the other adults around did not take notice either. As Kakashi predicted, in a large group as he was, Naruto was just another kid. No one paid too much attention. A successful plan, he thought happily to himself, as finally he just positioned himself near where Naruto would have to pass to come home. A few hours later he did, coming up looking like he may have gotten in a scuffle with the Inuzuka boy but otherwise grinning like a wild man. He came up, smiled at Kakashi, and Kakashi merely stood, and began heading home. He smiled underneath his mask. Hopefully Naruto had lost some of his apprehension, and he would start seeing what Kakashi said was true. "Ni-san, why'd you take off after a while? I figured you were safe enough. Remember, there is always safety in numbers." "Ah, I see. That's why most cells are 3 members." Naruto smirked to himself, happily munching on some Pocky sticks he had secreted away somewhere. Good, he saw the parallel. Not only a good lesson but one that was applied to his training as well. The night was ending well enough. "I don't believe it." Both Kakashi and Naruto stopped and looked behind them. Kakashi already knew who it was but still turned to face it. So far no one knew about Naruto save 4 people. The Hokage, Iruka, Asuma, and Kurenai. Other than that no one knew Naruto stayed with him. Everyone else just saw an orphan. But now straightened and faced the tall taijutsu specialist better known as Mato Guy. "I had heard you had a young ward, Kakashi, you devil." Okami, Kakashi muttered and brought a hand up to rub at his forehead. "Guy, to take on such a task as nurturing and protecting this young boy, you must have really rediscovered your flames of youth," the green-clad jounin proclaimed, taking on one of his crazy stances as he did. Kakashi moaned and glanced down at Naruto. "Ni-san, who's the freak with the eyebrows? Don't make eye contact, maybe he'll go away." Kakashi muttered but knew quite the opposite was true because soon Guy was up in his face smiling like a mad hatter. "Still with the insults, I see." Guy chuckled a bit, and then turned his attention to Naruto. "My name is Mato Guy, and though he always acts so cool and confident against me, I am Kakashi's eternal rival." Naruto merely raised an eyebrow and bit his bottom lip. Maybe this was a good thing. Kakashi could casually tell Naruto where Guy resided and he would have a new target, and Guy would be out of his hair. Watching the theatrics though, Kakashi doubted it. Guy was still Guy after all. "Speaking of, now that you are back to your old self," Guy smiled brightly and pointed in Kakashi's face. "You and I have unfinished business." "He's serious," Naruto quietly snickered. "We are currently at 30 to 26 with you in the lead." Guy put his hands on his hips and his face got serious. "I must have a chance to redeem myself and prove my flames of youth. You're not going to let it drop, are you?" Kakashi sighed heavily. "Fine, it's your turn to pick and let's make this short, Guy. We were kind of on our way home." "Of course, now let's see, should it be a contest of wills, a duel, eh?" Kakashi quickly pushed Naruto in the shoulder, and out of the way. "Go," he whispered, and Naruto realized they were slowly inching their way away from the green monster that had come out of freaking nowhere, and began talking loudly. They could still hear the man going through possible contests, and Kakashi was speeding up to get the heck out of there. Once they were a safe distance away he sighed heavily and scratched at his head. He just does not give up. "That was great." Naruto laughed. "Who was he? Why haven't I met him before?" "Naruto, stay far away from him, he's insane." Kakashi glared over his shoulder, checking for the presence of Guy. "I've been lucky to dodge him this long. Man, that outfit of his was wicked. Wonder if you can get one of those in orange?" "What? Ha! Got you, Ni-san." Naruto darted off a safe distance, then stuck out his tongue a bit. "Race you home." Kakashi let him get the head start and glared after the boy. "Oh, that was low and mean." Then again things were back to normal. Naruto stared blankly up at the silver-haired Chunin in the tree ahead of him. The man went on and on about the rules and how everyone in the village was forbidden to talk about him at all, but it did not prevent them from trying to do something about it. Mizuki himself was tired of living a lie. And for the rest of his impassioned revelation of Naruto's true identity, Naruto's whole world went blank. It could not be true, right? There was just no way it could be, but then again it all suddenly made sense. All the ambushes and hatred around his birthday, the way people just glared at him and made spiteful comments, and the sometimes altercations that had no reasons attached to them, it now all made sense. Iruka-sensei was saying something, pleading with Mizuki not to tell him, not to break the rule that the third Hokage III had put down. Once it was out, however, the other Chunin started taking sidelong glances in Naruto's direction to see his reaction. He could not react. He did not know how to. Naruto caught the movement from the tree. Mizuki was raising his large shuriken, spouting something to Iruka and aiming for his person. He was not sure what to do, but the tried and true urge to run began to creep into his mind. Still he warred with himself, this could not be happening. There was no way what Mizuki had said was true. The silver-haired Chunin had always disliked him, had to be lying. But then why had Iruka panicked like he had? What rule was everyone talking about? They all want me dead. All this time, they just wanted me dead. Maybe. The shuriken was loosed and Naruto involuntarily flinched. He had waited too long again to respond to a threat. Once again he was going to pay for his lax attitude. But when he heard the shuriken hit, he did not feel anything and opened his eyes to find Irika, standing in front of him with the weapon embedded lightly in his back. The Chunin winced as he held himself up over Naruto, who at some point had hit the ground in confusion. Naruto stared up unblinking at the instructor he claimed as his favorite and could not tear his gaze away. Why had he just done that? What was wrong with Irika? Why was he still sitting there like an idiot? Naruto fled. Like a coward he darted away from the situation with the scroll he had stolen slung over his shoulder. As he moved, Naruto caught the sound of Irika yelling after him and Mizuki taking up the chase. He could not care to listen to it all he cared about now was getting away. All that work, Kami, he was an idiot in the truest sense. Mizuki had tricked him, had used him. Once again Naruto had failed the genin exam because of a stupid basic skill. He could not go back to Kakashi in failure, so he had been open to any suggestion one of his teachers had given him. And when Mizuki had told him what he could possibly do, he had momentarily been elated. How easy! He had thought earlier that evening. How many times had he snuck into the towers? How many times had he gone digging through the records rooms to find information on his family? It was like an open book test. He knew the inside and out of that building and all of the traps laid in wait. But now the excitement he had held of actually learning the first skill on the scroll during the hours he had gone unnoticed was plummeting. Naruto clutched at the scroll's handle tightly as he flew through the trees towards no particular destination. Everything was for nothing now. He had been played as the pawn that he was and everyone blamed him. He finally came to a stop, grasping the scroll in front of him, panting and looking around frantically for a good place to hide. Maybe if Irika caught up, no, Mizuki had to be right. The fox killed Irika's parents, and according to Mizuki he was the fox. Naruto shut his eyes tightly and shuddered. It all makes sense. Naruto froze and held his breath as he heard Irika and Mizuki nearby. Mizuki was continuing to try to get Irika to join him in his chase, and Irika kept refusing. He was refusing to believe Mizuki when Mizuki said Naruto was merely the fox. Finally Mizuki had enough of Irika's interference and turned on his once comrade. The same shuriken once aimed at Naruto was neatly aimed for Irika, who seemed winded from his first hit. Don't let it happen. Don't. He'll say you did it. They'll blame you, he lashed out. He was sure Irika probably hated him, but he still felt attached to the older man who had kept an eye out over him at school. Had he done so on orders? Had the Hokage made him? It did not matter. If he did not do something, Mizuki would blame him for the Chunin's death regardless. Sucker punches were good for throwing people off their balance, and he got Mizuki good. Once he put to use what he had been practicing in the hours before Irika had found him. He and a near 1,000 other himps went after the silver-haired man with desperation Naruto could not quite place. He wanted to keep going, to hurt Mizuki just as much as he had hurt Irika and himself, but he stopped and backed away. After a while, keeping up the shadow clones made him tired, so he stopped and observed Mizuki, now unconscious, on the ground ahead of him. Irika was silent behind him as Naruto panted and waited to see if the Chunin was going to get up and fight more. Naruto finally could take no more. He sat the scroll down between Mizuki and Irika and took off again. There was no way he could go back now. There were probably ninja all over the village looking to kill him for stealing the scroll. The fox, he was sure they assumed, had finally woken up. He finally stopped near the river. His body was screaming bloody murder for both the chakra he had just burned through and for the absolute high levels of adrenaline still coursing through his veins. Naruto opted to scurry up a tree and huddled as tightly as he could in a crook of a sturdy, thick branch. He stared out into the darkness, and wondered just why it had taken him so long to realize that everyone treated him like shit, and there had to be a reason for it. Long-ignored memories of glares and names, of insults, and punches ran rampant in his mind as he silently hugged himself up in the tree he had found. Even the long-repressed memory of the old woman throwing him down an alley and threatening him should he return remained stuck in the perpetual loop. What did this mean? Was he Naruto, or was he actually the nine-tailed fox? Why hadn't the third told him? Was there actually a rule handed down by him limiting the whole village from talking about it? Did Kakashi know? If he did not, did he now? Naruto dug his fingers into his head. This was too much. He could not handle this. How was he supposed to handle this? They had all learned about the day the fox attacked the village. The imposing thought of such a demonic creature, made entirely of chakra, had made most of them cringe in fear. The story of the Yondaime bravely going forward and defeating it made them all feel brave again, and most looked up to the fourth and his sacrifice for the village. But if he was the fox, what kind of sacrifice was it? Or was he the sacrifice and the Hokage just prevented it, and that was what made everyone angry? Was he a demon fox or was he a human? He was not sure what to think anymore, and despite wanting nothing more than to ignore the man's words, they held merit. Everything made more sense with the demon fox in the equation. An audible whine broke through Naruto's racing thoughts, and he glanced down. A large German shepherd stood at the bottom of the tree sniffing at the base before glancing up in his general direction. The chocolate-brown eyes met his and he froze. The animal sat down and wagged its tail back and forth slowly, barking up at him and cocking his head to the side. Riri, Naruto whispered. The animal took it as a sign and leapt up to the branch Naruto sat on just as easily as Naruto himself had. Riri stopped just slightly ahead of him and lay down. Naruto could not resist, and he rested his hand in the scruff of the dog's thick fur. He leaned back against the base of the tree and continued to try to calm his racing thoughts. Riri eventually scooted closer, till he was between Naruto's legs and laid his head on the boy's shoulder. Naruto shuddered and wrapped his arms around the dog and clutched tightly. After all was said and done, all he could do was cry. Shinobi did not cry, that was a rule he supposed, and he was sure demons did not cry either, but he could not help the tears streaming down his face. It all just hurt too much. You'll still be my friend, right, Riri? You never hated me for being a demon? Riri whined and pushed away a little bit. His large muzzle came up and began licking at the tears on his cheeks. Naruto merely balled up his hands in the thick scruff of black back fur. That's all I ever was, a monster, Riri. They never told me. No. The words startled Naruto so badly he came up rigid and released his hold on Riri. He panicked and began looking around but found only the dog and himself. Riri cocked his head to the side and the dark black muzzle opened again, and the word came out once more. No. Not you, Riri? Naruto sniffed uncertainly. Maybe he was just losing his mind and he was imaging things, but he was pretty sure his dog had just spoken. You can talk? Pakin can. Riri's head tipped to the other side. I can learn? Riri nuzzled around him again and Naruto found he could only hug the large dog tighter. The tears did not end and he still felt panicked and rushed. He should not be wasting time. He should be moving further away, but he found himself glued to his spot. Sad? Riri whined in his ear. What did Silverhair do to you? He told me the truth, why people hurt me and call me names. Naruto snuffed and shuddered as the memory, only hours old, resurfaced. He told me I was the nine-tailed fox. Riri growled low in his throat, and it made Naruto cringed involuntarily. His dog probably understood now, and would turn on him. Instead he felt the dog sniffing the top of his head, his nose rooting around in his hair. You don't smell like a fox. The dog sat straight and looked at the top of Naruto's head, and then down to his feet. No ears, no tails, no fur. He said something about it being sealed. Naruto frowned and glanced away. He really was not too sure of the specifics either. But I was the Nine-Tails, the one that got the Yondaime, and all those other people killed. Riri snorted and shook its head as if he had something up his nose for real. He then laid his head back down in Naruto's lap. Different, I think. They were silent for a while when a thought struck Naruto like a 10-ton hammer. Wait. Who sent you? Why are you here? No one. Riri licked his hand comfortingly. I heard ninja hunting. I went hunting for you. Heard the Scarface calling after you, but he was hurt. So was the Silverhair. I did that. Naruto winced, feeling some of the pain in his fist from having gone at Mizuki so forcibly. If anyone from the village found him, he was in a lot of trouble, if not dead. He attacked you first. Riri reached up and licked at his chin. Defense. Scarface was worried, kept asking the Silverhair why he had to tell. Scarface hates me. Naruto mumbled, not too attentive to what his dog was calling his teachers. Any other time he would be elated that Riri could talk like Pakin did. Now he just felt defeated and lonely. I killed his parents. No. Riri growled again. You are Naruto, not a fox. I don't know what to believe anymore. Naruto closed his eyes and pulled on his jacket, loose and somewhat torn from the night's activity. I just don't know. Kakashi-sama would know. No, I can't. Naruto began to shake his head back and forth forcibly. He had to bite down on the panic rising in his gut again. No, he always helps when you are hurt. Riri whined, uncertain with the change of faith his master was showing. Not this time, Riri. Naruto shuddered and drew his arms up to his chest. I can't be sure. I don't know who knows and who doesn't and what they think and, okay. Riri's ears dropped a little as he interrupted Naruto's panic attack. He nuzzled back up to the almost teenager and let the boy use him as a leaning post. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly as the boy shuddered against him and clung to him like a lifeline. Normally his master was much more confident and willing to believe in others, but this was something new. He was frightened, more frightened than Riri had ever seen him. If it made him feel better to stay out in the trees, then they would stay there until he felt safe enough to return home. It did not take long for the boy to lose the battle with his exhausted state, and Riri felt the weight of the boy on him more so than before. He gently grabbed hold of his jacket, and slowly stood to make sure Naruto was on his back evenly enough, and then leapt to the ground below. He again laid and allowed Naruto to curl up against him, feeling much safer on the solid ground. Much later in the night, the sound of voices and the scent of humans turned Riri's head into the forest behind him. Naruto had finally fallen into a fitful sleep, not anywhere near restful, but it was better than just being unconscious. Ririshii stood carefully, to not disturb him, and then quietly shook the dirt from his stomach. The blonde merely groaned and turned away from where he had been facing. He shivered in the colder night air and Riri whined. It was mid-January and the nights held a bit more bite to them than in other months. It was too cold to be sleeping out like this. Riri quietly slipped into the forest growth and started tracking down what he had heard. He began slinking closer to the ground as he got within proximity of what he was searching for. It was a group sent to look for the boy, to hurt or help him. Riri was not sure. He had to be sure before approaching anyone, and he was not entirely sure Naruto wanted it to be anyone at all. The way he had acted earlier at the thought of even seeking out Kakashi or others told the dog he was uncertain about who to trust again. He went this general direction, I'm sure of it. Riri hunkered down on his haunches and peered through the thick foliage he was using for cover. Granted that his eyes did not quite work as well as a cat's would in the dim night lights, they were still good enough to make out what was ahead of him. I should have moved faster to stop him. I should have tried to stop Mizuki before. What's done is done, Irika. An elderly man reached out and patted the scar-faced teacher of Naruto's from earlier. There was little you could do to stop him in your state. Riri waited as the two of them traveled closer to his position. Suddenly he found himself surrounded by a pack of dogs, all barking and wagging their tails at him. He snarled a bit, and bared his teeth at the pack of Kakashis and lowered his ears. So much for not being noticed until he was sure it was safe. The two he had been focused on came his direction, and a loud whistle caused the other dogs to scatter, save for the annoying little pug, and Riri looked up above him. Coming down through the treetops was Kakashi. It was the trio he believed his master trusted the most, or at least he once had. Whatever the silver-haired teacher had told him earlier had shattered all semblance of trust Naruto had with anyone save for Ririshii himself. Ririshii. Riri sat down obediently and looked up at the silver-haired man he knew the best, Kakashi-sama, and cocked his head to the side. Kakashi merely knelt down a bit and scratched his ears lightly as he always did when Naruto was gone, and it was just he and Kakashi in the apartment. But shortly after the man speared him with a look. Where is he, Riri? Riri pretended to be dumb as he had for a while with Naruto. He was still learning how to speak as humans did, for his owner's sake. He cocked his head to the other side of his body. Kakashi frowned and poked him in his muzzle. You reek of him, Riri, you know where he is. Speak, you little mongrel. Pakken growled at his side and nipped at Riri's front leg. Riri could not help but yelp and jump away from the older pug. Those damn little teeth hurt worse than anything the big bulldog could throw at him. I know you can by now, you've slipped. Stupid pug. Riri snarled at him, lowering his muzzle down to Pakken's eye level. He bared his teeth slightly and growled a bit more. When I speak, I choose. Pakken was pleased enough with this and sat with his gaze now on Kakashi, who had rocked back on his heels a bit. Riri straightened up and ruffled a bit at the thought that he had just given himself away. Great, another one of you that can talk. Kakashi scoffed and poked the shepherd's muzzle again. So Riri-san, start talking. I found him first. Riri whimpered. Scared, hurt, confused. Riri, was it? The older man was coming forward. Did he saw why he was scared? Why he was confused? Silver-haired teacher called him the demon fox. The Ninetales. Riri laid his ears back and snarled. Talks in his sleep, says they want him dead. All this time they were trying to kill him. The old man sighed heavily and closed his eyes for a bit. I suppose it was the most logical conclusion for him to come to in light of it all. Truth then? Riri did come to attention at the lack of denial. Ninetales? The fox was sealed in Naruto as a baby, Ririshii. Kakashi took to scratching at his ears again with a gloved hand. Kakashi's gaze was behind Riri and far off. Riri wanted nothing more than to lead Kakashi to Naruto, but he feared his owner's reaction. Naruto had panicked at the mere mention of his guardian. All this time around us, and you still can't talk a straight sentence, you stupid mutt. Pakken snorted up at him. Riri growled back and took his front paw and laid it on the pug's head, pushing the smaller dog to his stomach. You've yet to tell me where he is, Riri. Kakashi interrupted their little dominant struggle. Riri whimpered and lay beside Pakken. A dilemma is what he believed this was called. They were all looking to him, waiting for him to answer their questions and lead them to the boy they had been searching for. Riri, afraid to go back. Riri answered in kind. Fears the shinobi, fears Scarface, fears you. The last admission forced Kakashi's gaze to fix on him particularly hard. Riri knew it hurt the older man to hear that Naruto feared him, at least for now he did. Normally he did not. Confused, Riri whimpered into the silence. What if just Pakken goes with you? The older man spoke up. His suggestion did have merit too. Naruto had never said anything about the pug that originally had been Naruto's favorite. Pakken nodded and stood. Riri agreed as well and began retracing his steps back to Naruto. When they came to him, Riri came up and nudged Naruto's shoulder with his muzzle and licked at his ear. Pakken only sat a few feet away watching with a sad look upon his face. Riri cut it out. Naruto mumbled and pushed the shepherd's nose away from his ear. I'm tired. Perhaps you would sleep better back home, Naruto. Naruto came up almost instantly, and his eyes turned to the little pug slowly, and then back up to Riri. He backed all the way till his back hit the base of the tree and glared at Ririshii. Why didn't you say something? We could have moved. Riri is worried about you, Naruto. Pakken continued on, answering for the shepherd. So is Kakashi. Naruto hung his head and brought his knees up to his chest. He wrapped his arms around them and huddled in on himself. Riri whimpered at him and nudged his arm a little and stuck his nose under. Pakken edged closer as well until he could rest his head on top of Naruto's feet. Irika told us what happened, Naruto-kun. He came to find us after you ran off. Pakken began to explain. Everyone knows that Mizuki tricked you, Naruto. No one is angry with you. That's not true. Naruto whispered. The whole village is angry at me almost all of the time. That is why Kakashi and I looked after you. Pakken sighed and nudged at Naruto's hand, dangling in front of him. Not everyone hates you, he will now. Naruto muttered from underneath his arms. The yandere was his sensei, Pakken. Kakashi-sen always knew Naruto. Pakken sat up and admitted to the boy. He's always known what the fourth did to you. Riri picked up on the wording Pakken had used. So did Naruto as his grip on his knees lessened a bit, and the boy peered up over his arms at the pug. You had no choice in this, and that does not make you the demon. People are just very ignorant. In time they will see what we all see, a good shinobi that loves Konoha despite all of this. Anyway, Pakken snuffed a bit, and smiled sadly up at the blonde. We really want to see if Irika told us the truth or not. Naruto looked between Riri and the pug before finally taking the bait. About what? You used Kagebushins, quite a lot of them. Naruto darted his eyes away quickly, assuming it was bad that he knew something off of that scroll. It is nothing to be ashamed of, Naruto. That is a hard technique to learn, and to have learned it in a few hours, that is quite a feat. I don't think I could do that many again. Well, no, not tonight at any rate. Pakken huffed and stood. But once you use it more and get the hang of it, it's forbidden though. No, it is advanced. Pakken corrected him. Some shinobi are given access to those scrolls. You've just learned something most do not even attempt until they are jounin. There was a very long heavy silence afterwards. Riri wondered if Pakken's attempts to put Naruto at ease were doing more harm than good in the boy's current state of mind. The boy huddled closer to Riri and leaned his head on his shoulder, eyes distant and unfocused on either of them. Naruto, please come back with us. Pakken whimpered finally. Naruto again darted his gaze away. Part of him wanted to believe the pug, but all he could keep remembering was everyone else. He was sure Kakashi did not hate him. He had lived with the man for how long now? Still, he had done something so incredibly stupid, not to mention he failed again, and there was just the slightest sliver of doubt. What if he was wrong? What if all this time the Hokage had made Kakashi as well? What if I brought Kakashi here? Naruto ducked his head again but did not refuse the request. He felt Pakken's weight off of his foot, and knew the pug had darted off to find the jounin. Riri watched the pug retreat, and then nuzzled under Naruto's arm. Poor pup. So when exactly did he summon that dog, Kakashi? Sandame asked shortly after the pair of nin dogs slunk off into the darkened forests. Around his 8th birthday. Kakashi sighed watching after the dogs. He summoned him by accident when he had gotten ambushed by some overzealous villagers. The mutts just stuck around since then. And you failed to tell me about this. Never seen it with Naruto before, Irika was saying lowly, more to himself than the two present with him. He does not seem to be a nin dog so much as he's just Naruto's dog, a pet more than anything. Kakashi rubbed at the back of his head and kept his eye out for the return of Pakken. He stays in our apartment most of the time, or goes off to explore with Naruto late at night. More than a familiar than a summons. How interesting. Sandame chuckled a bit. How did he come up with that idea in the first place? I taught him the summoning seals. Kakashi replied bluntly. I only had him sign the contract with Pakken, so it is a mystery as to how exactly he went from trying to summon Pakken to creating his own dog. I only taught it to him as a means of protection, which it seems to me it has worked to that end. Riri was the first to find Naruto. He must have heard all the ruckus we caused right after he got his hands on the scroll. Pakken landed quietly at Kakashi's feet and interrupted the silence that had fallen between the men. Kakashi glanced at the dog and looked behind him for the other two but saw no indication that the blonde and the shepherd had accompanied Pakken. I can't pull him like I did the last time, Pakken said quietly, and Kakashi snorted a bit. He recalled the little 4-year-old that Pakken had forcibly drugged into his reach in an alley 8 years prior. Alright then, now what? Sandame sighed. I'll deal with it, Hokage-sama. Kakashi pushed off from his leaning post and stretched a bit. I'll report back to you when we get back. Sandame nodded and looked back to Irika. Come Irika, let's get you actually bandaged up, not just patched so you can traipse around in the forests. Irika looked about ready to protest, then bowed his head and turned to follow the Hokage, only taking a moment to glance back at Kakashi, who was now following Pakken away. Kakashi had understood what Pakken was doing. The pug was unsuccessful in convincing Naruto it was safe, so he was dragging Kakashi to Naruto. This whole night was a nightmare. When he had heard about the stunt his roommate had pulled, he had gone out solo to look for him, with little results. But when a rather bloody Chunin had returned, scroll in hand, it became more worry than irritation that drove Kakashi to find the blonde. Irika had explained what Mizuki had done and Kakashi seethed. Something always seemed off with the Chunin instructor, and he always seemed obsessed with personal power. He had finally found a way to get at it without getting his hands dirty. Why Naruto had listened to the man was a question Kakashi would later have to ask, but it was not a question that was appropriate now. Irika's next words had been what Mizuki had told Naruto. Kakashi assumed sooner or later it would have come out. That many years without someone accidentally blurting out the truth about Naruto's role in the village had been a blessing, but now of all times? He came to the river with Pakken and sighed as he saw Naruto, head on his knees covered by his arms, and Riri sitting right next to him, looking up only as they approached. This revelation had devastated the boy. Kakashi could see it in his posture. Just as Naruto was starting to come into his own and stand up for himself, this came along and destroyed it all. As Riri had told them, this knowledge, as well as the memory of what happened to him if he ventured out on his birthday, had led the boy to connect the two together. Naruto understood now all the threats and the harassment, not that it helped his state of mind in the present situation. So naturally the reaction was to fear them. Now that he knew about it, maybe they would be more liberal with the chasing and the beatings. Or they really would try to kill him in the fear that he would release the fox. Kakashi strode over to where the boy sat and knelt down. Naruto had gone absolutely stiff and was waiting to see what the jounin did before he showed his face. He only reached out and placed a gloved hand atop his head and waited. Cautious blue eyes peered up at him from above a sleeved arm. "You okay?" he whispered as he ruffled the blonde spikes. "Kami, the kid was looking too much like Minato-sensei anymore. I didn't mean to Kakashi, I swear." "Mizuki, he swore. He swore if I learned something from Iruka told us everything, Naruto." Kakashi silenced him, and the boy cringed beneath his hand. "Is it true then?" Naruto suddenly sat up straight, and Kakashi found himself speared eye to eye with the blonde. "Is that the reason everyone treats me like they do?" "Part of it is true, yes. The fourth sealed the fox in you as a baby. It was the only way to stop the destruction of the village. But that does not make you the demon fox. The Yondaime would have never wanted anyone to treat you like they do. He believed they would see you as a hero, and his steed was sadly mistaken." Naruto only stared off into the ground. Kakashi was unsure what he should do about the sudden change in behavior, but he decided that maybe it would be better for the kid to be home where he probably felt safer, less exposed. "Come on kid, let's go. It's cold out here." "But the Vil, I won't let anyone touch you, Naruto. We'll just go home and you can sleep on this." Naruto stood and kept his head hung low, but he came up to Kakashi, and the older man slung his arm around the boy's shoulders to keep him within reach. Riri stood as well, his tail wagging slightly as he positioned himself near Pakin. The little pug jumped up onto the shepherd's back and they took the lead, heading out of the forests back to Konoha. "What do I do about this? It's like a different person took his place." Kakashi pondered as they went. He would take a few glances down at Naruto, but Naruto did not look up from the ground. Even when I first found him, this scared personality did not stay longer than a few minutes before he decided to go forward. It's like he's paralyzed. In all honesty, this might be a harder thing to fix than any of them thought. The next day, that worry only grew. Kakashi stayed perched in his windowsill watching particularly nothing while the morning and most of the afternoon drug on. Pakin and Riri had gone with Naruto into his room, and not so much as a noise had been heard since they returned late last night. Kakashi himself had ducked out at some point to report to the Hokage. He told him Naruto was indeed back in the village, but Kakashi had little luck convincing the 12-year-old to do more than just hide in his room. The Hokage had nodded and said to give it some time, and Naruto, they hoped, would come to terms with this new truth. The Hokage had also handed him the blue cloth headband with a head protector attached. Iruka's word was enough for him, and after looking over the tests himself, he had found that Naruto really had placed much higher, and should have graduated anyways despite his failure to produce a regular bushin. In all honesty, the boy had placed just below Haruno Sakura in the written portion of the test. That did not really surprise Kakashi that much. Kakashi actually only wondered if the boy had passed the second time but had been failed with the rest of the group a year ago. Part of him wanted to give the head protector to Naruto and tell him as such, but the other part wondered if he would also figure out why he kept failing. So instead, Kakashi had left the object on the kitchen counter and left it at that. There was really no way to tell what Naruto would want now that he realized there was more behind the harassment than his pranking. Finally, in the later afternoon, Kakashi noticed the door creeping open and waited patiently as a bleary-eyed blonde stalked out of his room. He blinked for a moment at the kitchen, and the headband still there, but then headed for where Kakashi was and sat beneath the window, his head resting just behind Kakashi's back. So Kakashi gently probed a bit, and waited to see if Naruto merely had wanted just to be near someone, or he was ready to talk about it. "I'm a jailer, not a demon fox," Naruto whispered and let his hands fiddle with his coat sleeves. "He went through more coats that way, correct?" Kakashi nodded and reached down to let his hand rest in the soft blonde spikes behind him. "It kinda explains these marks on my cheeks." "Yes, I guess it does." Kakashi smirked a little, an odd observation, but it was one that apparently he had been mulling over. "It's just," Naruto shuddered a bit and clutched tightly to the coat hems. "It's a sealing jutsu, right? What happens if it comes?" The Yondaime Hokage was a seal master, taught by one of the legendary Sanins. Kakashi explained slowly. "I have little doubt that the seal will hold. After all, it has for 12 years, hasn't it?" He took a quick glance down, saw Naruto peering up at him, and then went back to looking out the window. "There is no way the Yondaime would have done anything to endanger your life or Konoha, so I have faith in that seal. I have faith in you." In the silence that followed, Kakashi heard the telltale clicks of toenails on the Spartan floors of their apartment. He looked up to see Riri stalking towards the kitchen and then leaping up on his hind legs to reach the headband Kakashi had left there. The dog took it gently in its mouth and came trotting into the living room. Riri sat there, tail wagging, in front of Naruto, waiting patiently for the boy to take the object from him. Finally, Naruto reached out and took the headband and fingered it lightly in his hands. He did not put it on, but he did smile a little. "They let me graduate?" "Yes. But why?" "I can't make bushins. I failed that part of the test, and probably did really bad on the others." "No. You actually came in second on the written exam behind Haruno. You only lost a few fights in the taijutsu portion. Technically they should have overlooked the bushin failure and let you graduate. But I have a theory on the bushin," Had you ever bothered to ask? Kakashi teased lightly, hoping to get some rise out of Naruto. Your chakra control is shit. Thanks a lot, Nai-san. Naruto huffed. He put on the headband, looping it around his neck instead of his actual forehead. It's a rather common problem with people like you. Kakashi chuckled a bit, glad to see Naruto did not take the insult to heart, and had almost thrown one back in kind. People who are larger capacity chakra users usually have control issues. I mean, you passed me in chakra capability about a year ago. Oh, is that why I screw it up so it? Naruto sat up from the wall and really turned to face him now. I have more chakra than you? Yes. Did it not occur to you that you were basically learning a step up from a regular Bushin? Instead of an illusion, you were creating the real thing? The only reason Kage Bushin was so easy for you and regular Bushin are so hard is the amount of control and the amount of chakra being used. Then why is that technique on that scroll? I mean, if it's just a step up. Kakashi smiled. He had successfully gotten the kid's mind off of moping. Like I said, the amount of chakra required? I can do Kage Bushin. However, if you and I each produced one and saw which one lasted longer, yours would win. Anyone trying to do what you just did last night, how did Iruka put it, a small army, would fall over from chakra exhaustion. Naruto merely blinked up at him, for a little while anyways. Soon a smile started to creep across his face and he was thinking one thing. Kakashi was going to pay for admitting that one, but it was worth it to see the kid at least crack a smile. At any rate, are you at least feeling better about all of this, Oto? Hi, Nisan. I think I get it now. Naruto nodded and began to pet his dog. But I don't want people to see me and be afraid or angry anymore. How do I do that? That is something you yourself will have to come up with. Kakashi shrugged, pushed himself from his seat and stretched. You are a genin now, at any rate, and will be placed into a 3-man cell tomorrow. I think that deserves some reward. Great. Ramen. Naruto shot off for his room to change, Riri barking after him. Kakashi sighed heavily, shook his head and started heading out the window. Naruto would catch up and he had already made it clear where they were headed. There were still going to be doubts, and Naruto would probably think up of harder and harder questions, but for now he was satisfied with the answers he had been given. Kakashi wondered idly when he had time to study sealing jutsu, because his first concern had been what would happen if it was released or failed. Then again, he now knew just how well Naruto could get around without people noticing him. He had gotten in, out, and had time to study the sacred scroll before anyone had come upon him. Who's to say what all he knew at this point? And though he would not say so out loud, he had taken notice of the bright orange coat the kid had been wearing the previous night with a black t-shirt underneath. Naruto had snuck in, located, and then stolen the scroll while wearing orange. And it was a small wonder that Naruto had not brought it up. Okay, stupid ID photo, that's done. Made sure I was stocked up on everything. May or may not have bought a few more bowls of ramen. Naruto went through his own mental checklist as he strolled leisurely towards the academy. It was kind of nice not going in super early, but then again he had been given the impression perhaps he should be prepared. But doing all of those things were better than sitting in a room waiting to hear about their cells and who they would be paired up with. Naruto had already been thinking about it but did not like his chances. Shikamaru and Choji, sure, he would be elated, but he already knew that their fathers and Yamanaka Ino's father were close. They were their own cell, and something told Naruto whoever was in charge of thinking up these teams would stick to tradition. As of late, he and Kiba had really not been getting along, so he really was hoping that Kiba was not it either. That left a couple of other choices. Some were okay and others he cringed. So as Naruto came to door he was supposed to go to, he did get an odd flip in his gut. 1. He was sure someone was going to point out he was not supposed to be there. He did not graduate with the rest of the class. 2. He had not seen Iruka since a couple nights ago. He still felt a little guilty about the whole night, and he was still a little apprehensive about what it was sealed, as he kept reminding himself, inside of him, "Hey, Naruto." Naruto turned and found Iruka standing behind him, kinda bandaged up and looking a little sheepish himself. Naruto smirked a bit, but he knew it fell flat. "Oh hey, Iruka-sensei. About what happened, Naruto?" The Chunin began and rubbed at his ponytail. "You don't actually believe all that, do you? That I would hate you." Naruto ducked his gaze and fidgeted under the attention. "No, Iruka-sensei, not really, I just got so confused and I wasn't sure." "Well, I don't." Iruka patted him on the shoulder reassuringly. "Just so you know, thanks Iruka-sensei. You're alright, aren't ya?" "Oh yeah, it's nothing. Come on, let's go, everyone is probably waiting." Iruka went in before him, taking on that persona of head instructor pretty well. Naruto took in a deep breath and just strode right in. He ignored all the gapes and pointing fingers and just sat himself right next to Shikamaru and Choji, who were blinking in surprise. "What the hell are you doing here? Found out I really did pass." Naruto grinned madly. "Someone screwed up on my test." "No way." Choji leaned across Shikamaru and smiled happily. "We were afraid we were leaving you behind." "Nah." Naruto grinned, put his hands behind his head and tugged a little on his headband, tied around his neck. "Just late as always." Iruka cleared his throat and Naruto realized he was holding a clipboard in front of him formally now. Instead of giving some lecture or test, what usually happened when the clipboard came out, he began reading off team numbers and names. Team 10, Nara Shikamaru, Akimichi Choji, Yamanaka Ino. Naruto sighed. Well, that was no surprise to him. Shikamaru was groaning beside him just a little bit, and laying his head down on the table in front of the three boys. Sorry about your luck, man. Naruto patted Shikamaru jokingly. He could hear Ino a few rows away bemoaning her misfortune as well. A few more teams were read off and Naruto kind of half listened. He was out the two he would want to be with, but that had been guessed. He glanced around the room. There was not too many left from their little core group that Naruto knew that well, which could be a good thing. He could be on a team of people he did not know and get to know them. Team 7, Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto perked up and started paying attention. Well, here it went. Harino Sakura. What? Naruto flinched. He liked Sakura well enough, but like most of the girls in his class, she was completely and utterly obsessed with Sasuke. Then again, maybe she would calm down once away from the classroom setting unless. And Uchiha Sasuke. What? Naruto momentarily leaped up on the desk in front of him. Great, just great, out of all of the assholes he got the king. Paired up with Sakura, this was an utter disaster. No way. Forehead gets to be in a team. He could hear Ino going on as well. Oh, I guess our team's not so bad, Choji. Shikamaru elbowed Choji and smirked as Naruto glared back at him. At least we're not stuck with Sasuke. I'll trade you for Ino. Naruto flat out offered. Nah, I think we'll keep her. Team 10, Inuzuka Kiba, Hyuga Hinata, Aburame Shino. Oh come on Shikamaru. No way. You're stuck with the emo. Shikamaru smirked. And the fangirl. Naruto merely seethed. Great, just great. Now that he thought about it, maybe Kiba would not have been so bad. After all the names were read and things settled down, some of the teams were gathering up together. Naruto frowned down at the first row where two of his teammates already were. Sakura was already trying to get Sasuke's attention and fawning over the dark-haired Uchiha. This was a bad situation to be going into. Sakura loved Sasuke, Sasuke loved himself. Ever since the big massacre, the dark-haired boy had become unapproachable. He acted like he was better than everyone in the class and was constantly moping or seething. Naruto could not tell which. Of course, that was nothing unusual. Sasuke had always been somewhat unapproachable. Being from a big clan must have made him feel important. To have lost all that, Naruto watched as a familiar face came to the room. He knew he must have taken on a devilish look because the scruffy bearded man raised an eyebrow in his direction. Hello Asuma-san. Naruto still could not pass up the chance to torment a few of the other ninja around the village, and Asuma was target number one when he started getting out of the apartment. It was not that hard to figure out what would get the man's goat as much as those precious cigarettes of his, so he naturally went for them a lot. He saw the man's hand dart for the pocket. He knew he kept a pack and kept it there as he called out for Shikamaru's team. Naruto grinned even more. Now he had accomplices for later pranks against the bearded Sarutobi. One by one teams seemed to filter out of the room till only he, Sakura, and Sasuke remained. Naruto groaned and laid his head on the desk in front of him. I can't believe we got stuck with him. Naruto glared over his arms at Sakura, babbling away at Sasuke's side. Sasuke had his arms propped up in front of him, glaring at the blackboard. What way to go about this? Play the idiot or play the put-off joker? You're not the only one pissed about this. Naruto finally snarled in their general direction. Should count yourself lucky. Sasuke snorted. Still don't know how you passed, but you did something, didn't you? Wouldn't you like to know? Naruto grinned evilly down at him. Honestly, he was never, ever, going to discuss what had happened to anyone, but he knew he had taken on a Chunin in a forest and outfisted him. The Kagebushin were what Kakashi referred to as his trump card. Other genin would not immediately know how to do what he had done. Ugh, dope, emo. Hey! Don't call Sasuke that. Naruto merely went back to napping. He had woken very early and he did not want to deal with either of them until he had to. He'd have to meet up with Choji and Shikamaru after their team had their first meeting and see if they had reconsidered his offer of trading. Minutes ticked by and then an hour. Naruto was going to have to start doing things to the room to stop the boredom. He was already looking around idly looking for something good when the door finally did open a last time. You guys must be Team 7. Naruto blinked and blinked, but it was the same outcome. No way. Meet me on the roof. And then he was gone. Oh, this was wicked. Naruto quickly jumped up and began clambering out the window. Screw the stairs. He'd get up there faster outside. He was surprised to find Sasuke doing the same. He growled, tried climbing faster, but the Uchiha still passed him by. Both of them came to the roof and sat around on the stairs while Sakura finally came up the old-fashioned way. Kakashi sat on one of the rails looking rather bored and unconvinced. He took to looking at each one of them before sighing, crossing his arms in front of him. This is how he acts around Gai-sensei. Naruto pondered while the Jounin seemed to be deciding what to do with the three of them. So we're supposed to act like we don't know each other. Still, this is so awesome. I've never seen Nissan fight before. I don't think I've ever seen him train. Alright, let's start with introductions, shall we? Introductions? Well, what should we say? Sakura queried after glancing through the three of them. Oh, you know, likes, dislikes, dreams for the future, hobbies, that sort of thing. Naruto smirked happily to himself. This was exactly how Kakashi-sensei acted towards Gai-sensei. He was going to weed them out. Oh, it's on Nissan. I'm not like Guy, I'm worse. So why don't you go first, huh, sensei? Show us how it's done. Kakashi and he stared at one another for a while before the older man sighed, leaned back and began to think on the matter. My name is Hotake Kakashi, my likes and dislikes, not really your business, is it? I haven't really thought about the future, and as to my hobbies I have a lot of them, reading mostly. Your turn, Blondie. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, I love ramen, hate stuck-up jerks, he smirked evilly to his left. My one big hobby is growing plants. He saw Sakura's head jerk his way at that one, good surprise then more. And as for my dream for the future, Naruto had been thinking about this for a day or so now. He did not want people to look at him and feel fear or hatred. It was almost impossible, right? There was really no way he could do that without some sort of miracle. Except, his head turned behind him to the great mountain behind the Hokage's tower. 4 faces adorned the mountain, and each one instilled great pride. That was the role of the Hokage, to protect and instill the village with hope. He wanted nothing more than to protect this village, despite there being so few who would want to protect him, is to be Hokage. What if Kakashi gives Naruto dog summon contract? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoyed this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel, and leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down, and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.